She's right here.
Oh, yes, I see a monkey up there too. I was like, oh, is she up there?
Yeah, no, she's right there.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So we don't have quorum in the room, so we're going to skip approval of our minutes and hopefully come back to that when we have an additional Housing Commission member who joins us in person. So we can move on to public comment. Oh, yeah, public comments first anyway. So we're going to do public comment. We have Alice Hogan virtually, and then we will assess what we can do.
Good evening, Kellen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to introduce myself and take a few minutes to orient you to the organization where I work. My name is Alice Hogan. I know some of you on the commission, but I know we've had quite a few new members, so I thought it would be good to reintroduce myself and my organization. I live and work in Arlington. I grew up here. I was on the Housing Commission for about 13 years until, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago now. And affordable housing is my work life. I'm a master's in social work, and at the moment I am a consultant with housing policy with the Alliance for Housing Solutions. And I'm here tonight just to tell you a little bit about AHS. It is a 20-year-old nonprofit here in Arlington, kind of like a small think tank or policy organization. And we do policy, advocacy, public education around housing issues that run the gamut of our housing supply. So normally we're working on affordable housing and particularly low income housing, but you may have seen us and heard us more recently working on the missing middle study effort. We've been a community partner with the staff for the last 3 or 3.5 years. So I just wanted to introduce our organization and tell you a few things to let you know that we are a free resource in the community for people looking to understand more about different housing issues, policies, best practices, things that Arlington may look at or consider. We have a monthly newsletter that comes out online. We have 4 different listservs that you can join depending on your interest level. We have one about accessory dwellings, missing middle, housing advocacy, and then an overall housing more generally. We do regular blogs, and we have a social media presence, of course. And then we also have annual events, usually 2 a year. One is kind of a learning event in the spring or fall called the Lecky Forum, where we pick a topic of interest or something that might be useful for the community to look at. And in 2016, we had a missing middle forum, and then 2-3 years later, the study began. So it's that kind of bringing ideas to the community to try to face the problems that we encounter here in our community. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know about it and ask you to take a look at our website. If you ever wanted more information or to dig in deeper to a topic that you all are looking at, I'm happy to be a resource. It's allianceforhousingsolutions.org. And you may also have heard of our missing middle site, which we created over the last year or two, called missingmiddlearlington.net. So I'll talk to you later about budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. So I think that was our last public comment speaker, unless there's anyone in the room who is not speaking on an agenda item, but anyone who has public comment on items not on the agenda tonight. Okay. So moving on to approval of our notes from our 2 February meetings. I had a correction that I discussed with Alex before the meeting on the missing middle notes, and that was around the parking. So minimum parking requirements on the second page, where it says Kellen and Beth asked for clarification on option 5C. Staff answered that 5C is the same as 5A, except that 5A doesn't have the minimum requirements for transit proximate sites. So to change that to accept that 5A has the minimum requirements for transit proximate sites. That was the only edit that I had.
And the only other edits are page numbers will be added to it, and there was also Karen Service's name was misspelled on the last page, so that has been corrected as well.
Motion that we approve both sets of minutes.
Second.
Okay, any objection? Okay, they are approved. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the Serrano. So just to give a little setup for this discussion, in January, we had a tenant provide public comment about their experiences at the Serrano and concerns that they had about the property. We also had a letter from a number of advocates around conditions at the Serrano. As a follow-up, the commission had sent a letter to AHC, and I also had an opportunity to meet with AHC staff and along with county staff about those concerns. And we had also invited AHC as well as tenants from Serrano and advocates to come to this meeting in March and provide information about the concerns that were raised, as well as talking about the initial plans, at least, for rehabilitation or redevelopment of the Serrano apartment buildings. So we're going to start with a presentation from the CEO of AHC Inc. And then after that presentation, we'll have remarks from advocates and tenants. And then we'll have open discussion and time for questions from commissioners as well. So with that, can we start with?
Yeah.
So Alex is going to do the
I
slides.
can go down there, so.
Okay.
So I can see everybody? Okay. And is it best to talk into the mic, or does this pick me up?
So, yep, just the ceiling mics.
And I think, I don't want to interrupt, but I want to be them to.
You want to sit right here and I can go over that?
Thanks, Jen.
And can we get confirmation from someone online that you can see the screen?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
So I don't need that, right?
I can see it.
Can you confirm that you can hear Paul? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Let's see something. So let me introduce myself again. I'm Paul Bernard, and I'm the president and CEO of AHC. With me, I have members of our team, our community relations folks, Jennifer Endo and Roxana Hernandez, and Jennifer Smith on our communications team. And as well, we have our partner for property management, Sabrina Gindru. Did I pronounce that correctly? I'm sorry, I got the first part right. So I really appreciate being here tonight. I think forums like this are extremely important. The ability to have conversation, especially conversation around issues that are difficult. So I appreciate being here tonight. Appreciate you having me. And what I want to do is share a little bit, with you and give you an update of where we are within the Serrano community, as well as what some of our plans are going forward. So what I've done here, we have about 20 slides. I'm going to try to fly through the first 10, divided into 3 parts. First is to sort of level set, sort of who we are, sort of information around the Serrano, and give you just a brief history of kind of what in sort of the Serrano, and then what brings us here. That's the second part. It really is why I'm sitting in front of you today, with respect to a number of issues that have arisen. Then lastly, what I'd like to leave you with are some ideas about what we think we want to do with the Serrano, both in the immediate as well as future in terms of our plans. So the first slide, I'm not going to read through all these slides. I just want to let you know that we consider ourselves at AHC as a full-service affordable housing solution for Arlington. And what that means is, not only do we provide the housing itself in terms of units, but but we integrate resident services. So that's what we mean by full service or affordable plus. And what you see down at the bottom is that we strive to be resident-centered in all that we do. And just want to let the group know here and those who are listening in that we've embarked upon a year-long strategic planning process, really to align ourselves with what it means to be resident-centric. Next slide, please. In terms of our presence in Arlington, we've been in Arlington for nearly, most of you know, for 50 years, 23 properties in Arlington, about 3,300 units. Again, I'm not going to read through all these slides. You can read the slides yourselves, but just in terms of some notes, when COVID hit, we were able to provide $3 million in terms of rental assistance in 2022, generate about $6.5 million with respect to some of our sort of high school programs for scholarships. We have a number of new projects in our pipeline that are coming online. Arlington View is going to come online pretty soon, and fortunately, we were given the go-ahead to work with Goodwill on the Goodwill site to renovate and rehab and redevelop that site. Our properties, as you all know, it's more than just housing. We provide services as well. We were able to do, and we still do, food distribution at multiple sites, financial counseling, things and the like. Next slide, please. In terms of the Serrano community itself, I'd like to say that it's comprised primarily of Latino and Black and/or African American residents, working age adults, working in areas of construction and retail and hospitality. We have seniors and families, and we have connected families and family networks living within the Serrano. And lastly, the Serrano consists of sort of long-term residents. We're fortunate for over close to 30% of our residents have been there for over 5 years. Next slide. In terms of the Serrano in the income designations, this is the committed affordable units piece. We have a total of 280 units. 10 of them are designated for permanent supportive housing. Another 56 units at 60% area median income or AMI or below. 140 units are below 80% area median income or below. And then 84 units are unrestricted. And what unrestricted means primarily is market. And for the market in the Serrano, that's anywhere between 70 and 80% anyway. So I would say for the most part, it really is kind of 100% affordable from an AMI perspective. We have strong tenancy at 95% occupancy. Slide. Giving you a sense of the demographics with respect to race and age. As you can see on the left-hand side, racially diverse in terms of the community. On the right-hand side, our age demographics are also diverse. Mostly adults at 55%, seniors at around 90%. And then we have youth at around 26%, which also is indicative of the fact that it's a community filled with families. Next slide. In terms of, this is one I'm not going to read through, but I want to just give you some examples of our resident services program. We provide a variety of programs. First and foremost, we have 2 full-time staff, resident services staff at the Serrano. I mentioned earlier that for Arlington, we were able to sort of grab $3 million worth of rental assistance. For the Serrano, it was $1 million of that $3 million for rental assistance in the Serrano. And as you can see, there are a number of other services that we provide, at the Serrano with those full-time, tenured resident staff there. Next slide. In 2021, we did, and I'll come back to what those results were. We recently updated our resident survey. And here's some of the results. We had a resident survey. We opened it up in December 1st, closed it in January 6, 2023. That's cut off a little bit. It was anonymous. It was put out there both in English as well as Spanish. We received 87 responses, which is roughly about 31% response rate. For some, that's okay. We want to get that response rate up a little higher. It was a lot lower the first year that we did it. And so the primary result was 81% of the residents, at least who were polled, were satisfied. 14% were neutral and 5% dissatisfied. And then we had sort of free-form responses. We just developed a word cloud for what those responses were. The letters that are in bold and larger, there were more responses that fit within that category. Now, last year, or 2021, we did a similar survey, 72 responses, 47% satisfied, another 47% were in the middle, and then 6% were dissatisfied. So in comparison, it looks like we're doing a little better than we did in 2021. Next slide, please. Just a brief history to kind of catch everybody up to where we are currently. AHC acquired the Serrano back in 2014. It's an older building, 1960s venue. There were 2 major fires 3 years later in 2017. And between 2014 and 2019, we put in terms of capital expenditure, about $4.7 million for improvements, new roof, boiler, chiller, trash removal infrastructure. And then in 2019, I guess that's when the tables turned slightly, we received a whole bunch of, I would say, there were acute maintenance and property issues were first uncovered. Then we have all experienced the pandemic, and for us what the pandemic meant as, and not just for the Serrano, but any sort of property that we own, there was some deferred maintenance, except for things that of emergency nature, because we just couldn't get into the properties and maintain safety. And then we pivoted our services really to focus in on things like eviction prevention and making sure that people had their homes. And then lastly, in 2021 and 2022, that's when the real change started happening. We switched out from managing the properties ourselves to third-party property management. There were a number of leadership changes at AHC. The first one was at the board level, where we incorporated a couple of slots for residents on the board. And the second one was more at the staffing level, where there were many changes in senior leadership, me being of note. Next slide. Okay, so now this is the second part in terms of, well, what brings me here. There were a number of letters that have gone out that we've received from a number of organizations as well as advocates. And if I were to summarize what were the major themes, they were really around heat and water interruptions during the last 3 months going into January of 2023, elevator outages, and, excuse me for a second, and poor communication and customer service. And I would also add to that last one, the threat of retaliatory actions by both staff as well as perhaps even property management. And what I gathered with respect to conversations from folks was there's this looming sense that either nothing had been done, nothing has changed, and matter of fact, conditions had deteriorated at the Serrano. So what I'd like to do now is just take each one of those things, those 3 bullet points in order, and just go through sort of what the issues were and what our responses were, if you don't mind. Next slide. So first, water and heat. Well, you know what, we unfortunately, this is an old building. It's 1960s venue. It's inefficient, and it has inefficient configurations. And so what is kind of routine for newer buildings is not so routine for our buildings. As an example, if you have to replace heaters or convectors, you'd think it'd be easy enough to isolate the issues and isolate the problems and just turn off a switch. But this is almost like a Christmas light piece where one light goes out, everything goes out. And so in order to do some repairs, before we start separating out the building and putting in new valves, many units were, even those units that weren't affected by whether it's routine repair or emergency, they were shut off and they were impacted by it. We had in December to February, like 4 major sort of heat out, I wouldn't say major, but heat outages, and it affected seven apartments. They may not have been directly impacted because they had heat issues, but they certainly were impacted. When we went to fix the heat, we had to turn off the water. And we counted a total of 10 hours, not 10 hours straight, but over the course of December to January, where people were interrupted. And the last piece is when we put the new convectors in, sometimes it's just a matter of training. training residents on how to use the new system. And so we get calls. It was just a matter of going up and helping folks understand how to actually operate the system. So what we did with respect to the heat, we made heaters available. In terms of water repair, what we've tried to do with the help of Drucker and Falk is to make sure that we schedule those repairs on Wednesdays unless there are emergencies, because on Wednesdays it's more predictable and a lot of folks aren't home. And then if there were water shutoffs, and I remember when I first joined the company in May, and it's just a matter of, we have 2 buildings at the Serrano, and both buildings were connected, the water systems were connected. And when we had major issues, we'd have to cut off water to all the apartments. And so I remember when I first got here, we put valves in place so that we could shut off one building and not have to impact the other. When those things happen, we try our best in terms of providing water for everyone so that folks aren't without. We try to do as best we can with respect to communication. We'll get to communication later on in the presentation. So I do believe that that's an area where we need to improve. And, what we've been trying to do now is just put valves in place so we're not disturbing a whole bunch of folks. Next slide. With respect to the elevators, we did have a major elevator issue starting around Thanksgiving and probably ending in the beginning of January. I would describe this as a perfect storm during the holiday season. We talked to what was the cause. Unfortunately, we had a squirrel who chewed through some conduit and created an electric shock, which then sort of fried some of the drives within our elevators. They just threw drives off. We try to bring them back online, and then they go off again. So in late January, it really came to a head where in Building 39, both elevators, they were out. Now, the issue when I say the perfect storm is that we faced, like most folks, we were facing supply chain issues, staffing and vendor issues, and folks just weren't around for us to be able to get the equipment that we needed for the repairs. But we were finally able to sort of get to the right people at Otis Elevator with the help of the Arlington County folks, and we got at first a replacement sort of drive. It wasn't a new one, a replacement drive. Got one elevator going, and then by January we were able to get new drives in. What we tried to do again was have extensive communication with residents about what was going and when we thought the elevators were going to come back up. We did this through door notices, emails, and text messages. Property management, especially when both elevators went out, and that was on Christmas Eve. When both elevators went out, we tried our best we put people in place to help assist folks, because it's 8 floors, assist folks with packages going up and down. So we did that. We checked in with those elderly folks who are listed and folks who needed help to see if they needed anything different from us. And then we put together a maintenance program with Otis so that, we did 2 things with Otis. We put together a maintenance program to totally look at the overhaul of these elevators. And we started to put spare parts, in inventory, so that when a drive goes out, we don't have to worry about supply chain issues. Last thing we did, it was really just a show of appreciation that our residents had patience with us. We provided $50 gift cards. I mean, $50, it certainly may not be enough in terms of the frustration that you had, but we wanted to just show folks that we were appreciative of their patience with us. Next slide. Communications. I think that in terms of communications, we've made a lot of strides, but this is an area where I do know that we can do better, and I believe we are doing better. What we've done to date is, especially around things like reporting, we have a guide for how do you report issues through our property management folks, messages in English as well as Spanish. We have a variety of channels, whether it's email, text, door-to-door, written notices, again, English and Spanish. we've attempted, and I think with some success, to open a direct line with our advocates, with senior leadership over at AHC. We've taught and provided trauma-informed training. We've also instituted inclusive and diversity training for site staff. When issues arise, we try our best to be as swift as we possibly can in terms of dealing with those issues. In some instances, we've had to make some staffing changes as necessary. And the last thing I threw out there is we have, in terms of communications and customer service, we have experienced resident services team in Drucker and Falk there to be of help. Next slide. So before I cover the sort of immediate plans and the future plans, I want to just give folks a sense of what we've done. Again, I'm not going to read all the bullet points on the left-hand part of this slide, but some of the things that we've done when I first got here, we saw the conditions of a lot of the balconies, 8 to 16 balconies, where we've either replaced them or repaired them fully. Since November of 2022 up until currently, we have completed 1,184 work orders. We have a number of 15 to 30 work orders still pending as of the end of last month. Next slide.
Would you mind holding for 1 second
Sure,
while
no
we turn on these 4 microphones on the table?
Got it.
It's on the top.
Oh. Check to make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. We're on slide 15 now. This is a continuation of some of the things that we've done. We've instituted a new practice, and it's going to be a regular practice where we do 100% inspections of all of our units, of all of our communities. And Serrano was the second 100% inspection that we've done. And what a 100% inspection is, it's both a physical inspection as well as a service quality inspection where, if residents are around, we ask them how things are going. So what we found in 100% inspection, we just completed it at the end of last week. We found that a majority of the units are in good shape. You will see as I get down to some of these other bullets, there are some units, especially on the bottom, that need some attention. We believe the direct cause of this is the need to repair some of the exhaust system to improve ventilation. There are about 20 to 30 units, primarily on the bottom floors, but there's some moisture, some staining, some tubs and tile refinishing that we need to do. We looked at issues around pest control. I realized that was an issue back in 2019. And while pest control is improved, we still believe it's a focus for us. Especially we've found some hot spots which we really have to take care of. Electrical panel doors, we need to replace them because that could cause for a safety issue. There's still, I said we did a 100% inspection, but there's still 8 units that we have to get into. We couldn't gain access. And when we were interfacing, and it took about 2.5, 3 days for us to do a 100% inspection. But we received a lot of positive comments from residents. And the last thing that you see on this slide is our renewed focus on asset management. One of my priorities as CEO and president of AHC, when I came, is I knew I had to tackle issues around asset management because asset management is the bridge between decisions that we make and our property management. And so, so I'm rebuilding, and I brought in a new asset manager. We're rebuilding all that and putting structures and putting systems in place. Next slide, please. So here are our immediate plans in terms of 2023 for the Serrano. We have to deal with the cameras and the fob systems, upgrades. We're going to put in sort of new children's play area near the pool. Got to do pool deck resurfacing and a new pool furniture. Continue to work on isolating those valves so that we don't interrupt numerous properties, numerous units, as we're doing individual repairs. Talked a little bit about the exhaust system, but in addition to that, duct cleaning and service for each unit, especially around the bathrooms and the kitchens. And we're going to stay on top of these elevators. They're old, but stay on top of the elevators. We have a maintenance contract with Otis now that should help cover that for us. Repair some of the front doors. The front doors are loose when you go in, repair the front doors, and continue to do what we can to keep the lines of communication open. We're going to have not only just resident meetings on a regular basis, but host resident events to really reinforce that community feel when you go to the Serrano. Next slide. In terms of some of the investments that we've already made in the Serrano, I've divided this into maintenance, sort of operating and capital expenditure. So on the 2022 column, that's what we actually spent, $472,000 in 22. We plan to spend $504,000 just for maintenance and repairs in 504. I'm sorry, in 2023, 504 2023. With regard to capital expenditure, these are major systems. We spent $1.5 million in 2022 and plan to spend sort of plus another million, $2.6 million in 2023. And you see the bottom where with the new equipment, it costs us around $112,000 between December and January. Next slide. So in the immediate future, so this is future, but it's the immediate future, the debt on the Serrano is coming due in 2024. So the first thing we have to do is to figure out ways to refinance that debt. Hopefully, we'll find good terms in this rising interest rate environment where we won't have to feed the property. But we're out there having conversations with a number of financial partners for that. From a physical perspective, next slide. From a physical perspective, unfortunately, with COVID and with the rising interest rate and inflation environment, we had to delay what we thought we were going to be able to do a lot sooner. And we knew buying the Serrano that there were going to be improvements. And what you see going from left to right are what we're considering in terms of improvements. The option A, so 1A, would be just a total renovation, of the building. It's new systems, major systems, but no change to the structure, just a total sort of inside out kind of renovation and rehab. The option 1B is a renovation plus if we can find space either on top of the hill or on bottom of the hill to bring some new units, that's what we would do, okay? Then we move into something that could be a combination where it's a combination of renovation and new build, where you might take down one of the buildings and build it just a total sort of rebuild of that building, or a full rebuild where you demolish both buildings and then and build new. All this would be phased and appropriate. Next slide. So here are the considerations in terms of what we're going to do. Here are our actions. Clearly, you're dealing with sort of rising construction costs. They probably stabilize right about now, and some costs are going down. But interest rates are going up, and the economic climate is not getting any better. Whatever it is we do, we're going to have to be able to attract the right capital to get there, as well as cover our existing debt. We've already been in conversations with a number of financial as well as development partners, probably 4 or 5, and we're going to continue to talk to folks, narrow that list down to perhaps partners we might want to go forward with. Before we do anything, we want to reach out to the community. Make sure that to gather interest and preference, but also make sure the community knows what we're doing at each step of the way. And then all this is going to happen in tandem with the refi. Next slide. Okay, so I'm at the end of this. I want to leave this up for a second to let you see what we want our commitments to be to becoming more resident-centered or resident-centric. I would just highlight what's really important to me is probably that middle bullet that talks about building community and raising resident voice. The picture that you see to the right, it was a performance that was done primarily by Toronto residents that were speaking out about their issues associated with barriers within the system and racism. And this happened about 2 or 3 nights ago. And it warmed my heart because I said, that's exactly what our buildings, our facilities, our communities should be able to provide. Outlets for not only places for people to live and have decent, safe, and affordable housing, but places where people can grow and places where folks can communicate. And so with that, I think I've been going over my time, but I appreciate you having me here and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate the presentation. I know I have a number of questions. I'm sure other commissioners do as well, but I think before we dig into those, I'd like to turn it over to some of the Serrano tenants as well as the advocates to provide their feedback as well. And I'd like to invite whoever is going to be speaking to come join us at the table. Just need to make sure we have access to one of the microphones for them. And who is going to be the first speaker?
I can go first.
Brian? Okay.
I have a statement, if that's all right. And can everyone hear me?
Confirmation from someone online, please. Still hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Coleman. I am the second vice president of the NAACP Arlington branch. I currently serve as the Housing Committee Chair. I've testified here before this body in the past regarding the living conditions of several affordable housing properties and will continue to do so until the residents get the services they deserve. Having visited a few properties, particularly those owned by AHC, and being given the opportunity to speak to several tenants, I've seen firsthand some of the conditions in which many of our fellow Arlingtonians live and heard stories of people at their wits' end. Conversely, I've also spoken with staff at AHC and understand the circumstances they inherited were not at all ideal and recognize their attempts to improve the situation. However, I believe the larger point is about the expectations that Arlington County should have for its nonprofit housing partners in terms of property maintenance and management, including customer service. I also have concerns about the current county setup, which relies on resident reporting for alerts about issues. This presumes residents know how to navigate the system, are comfortable in expecting they can speak to a bilingual staff member, and are not afraid of losing their unit or another form of retribution. Moreover, the county should take immediate action by implementing the recommendations submitted by the Joint Subcommittee on the Status of Aging Properties. While progress has been made on this effort with the establishment of an alternative dispute resolution board, there is yet much more the county can do. For example, the county can work with tenant advocates to develop guidelines for property owners and property managers operating properties that receive AHIP funds on expectations for respecting and appropriately interacting with resident councils and tenant associations. They can streamline the housing complaint process so that residents can call or go online to one portal or office that will make the appropriate referrals. They can also expand fair housing enforcement within the Office of Human Rights to include investigations of third-party anonymous complaints, investigations of patterns and practice of violations, and investigations of disparate impact violations. Furthermore, I'm encouraged by the steps that AHC management has taken regarding maintenance and communication and their stated commitment to progress. However, we must remember that progress is a journey, not a destination, and it's incumbent on all of us to hold providers of affordable housing and the county accountable to ensure that all Arlingtonians have access to adequate living conditions and are able to live with dignity.
Right. Janet, are you next, or are you facilitating? Or
You can see.
I can share the mic here. Yeah. But, well, thank you for your presentation. I guess my interest here was to listen in on the last part of the plans that you have for the property, because I think that the residents deserve to know that. And we're here willing to work with you. And so what I think that we should also establish is a group moving forward of residents so that their input is taken into consideration in the future planning and design of the site.
So would you mind just introducing yourself?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. My name is Saul Reyes. I'm with Bugata Tenants Association. Involved in the Serrano since we first started hearing the issues around May, summer, going into summer 2019 and then into the fall. So we have some residents here, and Janet Valenzuela has also been working with this throughout, the entire time.
So, Marjorie, are you up next? Or who is that?
No, they-
Okay.
Great.
And I would just ask to try to project so that the microphones
Okay.
on the top of the ceiling are also picking up everything. Thank you.
I brought some written copies of my statement as well because I'll try to be brief, briefer than my written statement. My name is Marjorie Green, and I'm one of the Arlington Leaders and Voice Virginians organized for interfaith and community engagement. And as part of that, I have been involved in working with tenants and advocates at the Serrano since 2019. So I've seen the worst, and I've seen the attempts at improvements over these last couple of years. There have been improvements, welcome improvements, and I take at face value Mr. Bernard's professed intention to do better and the professions of intent to do better from the Serrano board. I'm here to tell you that based on what I know from my continued involvement in the Serrano, while there have been necessary improvements, and what you heard today sounds very well organized and very well planned, in practice, it has not worked out that way for tenants. There have been disruptions in tenants' lives. There have been tenants who have been disrespected by the property management office. They have not received prompt service. They have gotten threats of retaliation. The communication has not been what it should be, and I appreciate, Mr. Bernard, your recognition of that. I appreciate the recognition that that needs to change. That does need to change. And the disruption that is occurring in the lives of too many tenants still needs to change. And I want to make sure that we don't discount the challenges that residents are facing simply because they're not the immediate health and safety challenges that we all learned of in 2019 and 2020. These are still significant impacts on the residents' lives. And I would submit to you that I don't think any one of the rest of us in this room would be comfortable living with what too many of the tenants are still experiencing. And my question is, if we're not comfortable living in those circumstances, why would we be comfortable allowing our neighbors, our friends, our colleagues, our kids, friends, parents to live in those circumstances? So I'm encouraged to hear the plans for the Serrano. I will note that the county, the county and the community took our foot off the pedal after there were some initial improvements at the Serrano. And I would like to think, but I cannot say confidently because of my experience with the Serrano, I would like to think that all of this would have happened without community scrutiny because of the people who are now in charge at the Serrano. But I can't say that with any confidence. And so I urge this commission to stay in touch and to make sure that the county keeps its foot on the pedal and makes sure that the Serrano does what they say they're going to do, makes sure that you hear from residents that in fact it's getting translated from the boardroom to the units at the Serrano, and make sure that what ultimately happens at the Serrano is indeed resident-centered, because for too many years after AHC purchased the Serrano, it was not resident-centered. I have some specific suggestions, and I won't go through all of them in detail. I do want to ask that this commission work with the Tenant Landlord Commission to hold regular sessions like this and ask AHC to come and present and ask residents to come and present so that we can follow up and keep our foot on the pedal and make sure all of this is happening. Public scrutiny made it happen the last time, and I think we still need public scrutiny. I'm also asking this commission to work with the county to try to identify a different way to get tenant input. Right now, the onus is on tenants to get in touch with the county if they're not receiving the service they should be. As Brian said earlier, that's just not a workable system. And Vanessa will tell you that she hasn't heard from tenants at the Serrano over the last couple of months. There's a reason for that. They're scared. They have trouble using the system. It's not an easy system to use. I've had trouble figuring out whom to call for what. They don't know whether they can speak to someone who speaks Spanish or Amharic or whatever they do speak. So I request that this commission make an effort to work with the county to figure out a different system. I will tell you, I want to say thank you to the county employees here. My experience with them over the last 5 years has been that they're caring people who really want to help. They do not have the resources right now to do their job of holding our nonprofit housing partners accountable, as Brian mentioned earlier. They need more help, they need more staff, and they need more money. And I hope that we will all advocate for that in upcoming budget sessions. I'll leave it at that and say thank you very much.
Marjorie? Janet?
Yeah,
You next.
thank you, Paul, for giving a nice presentation. Although people might believe that when you put it there, it's nice in theory, but not what is happening to the rest. Okay, as of right now, I don't have a statement. I'm just going to say what about my notes. Right now, the Serranos don't have the fire alarm is not working for 2 weeks. Okay, and right now, while we were coming here, there was fire on A Road and Florida Street. So by passing by there, they were thinking, what's going to happen in case there is fire at Serranos? We don't have the fire alarm working for 2 weeks. That is a safety issue. Okay, like they said, the elevators start functioning for almost 2 weeks. Both elevators, even though they had somebody sitting there or waiting to help people to carry their groceries, who's going to carry the babies? Who is going to carry the elderly? Who is going to carry somebody that they don't want to walk eight flights, all the way up? But it's not the same having people helping carry the bags than using the elevators. Then they were able to fix it one elevator, and then again it broke down the other elevator. Yesterday, the elevator broke. I thought it was one time. During the whole day, it broke twice. They don't send notification to the residents what's going on. They came and fixed twice in one day, right? So now also there is a lot of issues with the security. There's been report about a lot of things. They're not doing a thing about security. There is reports that it's kids after, in the afternoon, late in the afternoon, on the back side of the building 39. They are doing many things they're not supposed to do. There is no security. Packages is still being disappearing. And yesterday I observed one. That somebody opened a package that it was not belong to that person and left the box in the elevator. Then we pointed out the box to the guy who was supposed to be watching for the fire because they contracted up 2 people in there to be sitting as firefighters probably. I don't know. I didn't see a bucket with them, but they said they were, there to watch for fires, So I asked them, somebody stole this box. And he was there, and then somebody stole that box and left it empty inside the elevator, right? So, the water, every time the water is shutting down, when the water is back, there is a yellow water for the residents. Okay, no explanation. At least they could say, when we're gonna put the water back, you're gonna experience yellow water, let it run, for 5 minutes, or I don't know for how long. Because sometimes people, they don't know why they have a yellow water. Even if they don't shut off the water, we went in one unit, they flushed the toilet one time, we were with him, and they flushed the toilet and filled it up again, the yellow water. So it's not only when they close, we don't know what's going on those pipes, but it is, people are getting yellow water in there. Okay, so now, we see on the presentation, you see the resident service. Resident service is separate from what the people live at Serrano's. They receive pastries in there, or they give them food. They talk about food distribution during pandemic. It was not that way because I was the one distributing food. They talk about, doing vaccinations during the COVID. Maybe it was at the end of that, the big campaign that we did it. So they attribute things to you that is not belong to Serrano's. You did one thing and you counting for 100. And you said in there is a good satisfaction of people living at Serrano's. There is not. You don't count with the residents. The last meeting that they had, imagine having a meeting at 5 in the afternoon. We said about those meetings to change those meetings at least to 6:30 or 7. People are driving home from work. Who's going to be there at 5 p.m.? The last meeting, there were only 9 people in that meeting. There was no Hispanic residents. And the next day, we met with the Hispanic residents, and they said what they were going through. They are afraid to speak. They are afraid to say something because they feel afraid of the retaliations. And that some of them, they've been said, or they've been quiet. And what they also do is when they identify somebody, they will go into their units and they will fix and change everything in that unit for that person not to say anything anymore. And it happened, and I talked to residents. I'm saying here stories after stories that I heard from residents. When we gonna end this? I know that it's not end because the building is old, but at least try to treat the residents with respect and dignity. When they call in the office, especially the office, Sabrina, nobody answered the phones. And they have to go to the office, and then your people are on their phones. They have to go to the office to get their attention. Even when they are in the office, they saying, you need to talk to the manager. So can I talk to the manager, or you need to make an appointment? Because the manager is never there. Or maybe she's there when, things happen, she's not there. I don't know. You need to make a lot of improvements on your service to the residents. We talk about this many times. I'm tired of this. I know, I gotta give it that you did improve Serrano's. I walk, you guys improved the balconies, it's good. I'm happy for that. But you need to make the other improvements that is necessary for the healthy living of these families. They have children in those units, and they don't deserve to live on those conditions because the money that they pay for rent is the same color of money that we pay for taxes, that we pay for our homes. There's no difference in money. The only problem is that they don't have the same services that you all got. I don't think any of you will live at Serrano's on those conditions. I don't think you will live in there. You need to be brave enough or be scared to live there. Also, they want to be there because they decided to choose that place they wanted to call home. They're raising their kids in there. They don't want to move to other schools. But what happened? To what price? So please, I'm begging you, commissioners, do something. We need to change the affordable homes in all Arlington because we're only talking about Serrano's right now. What about the other communities? What about Hardy Hall? What about Arbor Heights? What about the other communities? Nothing is perfect. There are always going to be issues. But at least if we show care, that we care and not lie about, things that they've been saying, that everything is okay and people are happy, that's not true. And I see that 47% are Latino. But how many people came to that meeting? How many Latinos that attend to your meetings? So please think about these people. They deserve better. And you were chosen to represent people. And I hope you're doing this in the best interest of people, that they don't have voice. Thank you.
Janet, are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, the people are afraid to speak.
Good evening to all. I am a resident of Serrano. The motives that bring me here are to speak what is happening at the Serrano.
Tenemos desde el 2022 teniendo muchos problemas.
Since 2022, we're having a lot of problems.
Fueron los elevadores que tardaron, un elevador tardó 2 meses
And
en
the first were the elevators that were not working for almost 2 months.
para nosotros era muy preocupado porque hay personas que están incapacitadas y del 8º piso hasta el 1 era difícil. Pusieron una persona a ayudar que decían que se ayudaban a las personas, mentira. Yo vi a una señora anciana que venía arrastrándose de las gradas para abajo.
There were concerns about the elevators not working. There's a lot of people that were unable or incapacitated to use the stairs. They indicated that could be a person there to help the people, but that person didn't help at all. They were not that helpful with handicap.
Yeah, no, and especially they said there was one person that couldn't walk, and she saw literally, she was sliding the stairs because she couldn't walk.
Por fin arreglaron elevadores.
Finally, they fixed the elevators.
También hay otras cosas que tenemos ratones en los departamentos.
We also have rats and mice in the
Mice.
elevators.
Ajá. Tenemos ratones, a veces llegan al descontrol, pero animales mueren y a veces entran más.
They have
Sí.
pest control, but sometimes even though the pests are dying, more are coming.
Es muy difícil para nosotros dejar como si pan o otra cosa ahí afuera porque el ratón brinca.
It's hard for us to leave any food outside, bread or anything, because the mice come and eat it.
También me preocupa porque armas también.
And I'm also worried because there's no alarms.
Uno no sabe en cualquier momento, como el día de hoy veníamos por acá y encontramos en la calle de la 8 Road y por el street un incendio.
You never know what could happen
Es muy
because
difícil.
an emergency could happen. Like today when we were coming at 8th Road, a fire, and we wouldn't be aware of it.
Entonces, es difícil para nosotros vivir ahí porque no duerme uno tranquilo, está con el miedo que puede pasar algo.
It's hard for us to live there because we're always afraid that something could happen.
Tienen una persona ahí que pone en el día y en la noche, pero para mí eso no es muy No,
Referring
es
to
muy
a fire
seguro,
hose.
porque la persona que va a hacer no lleva ni un distinguidor en la mano por aquello, no más camina, y entonces.
They have a person over there that it's supposed to notify or do something. There's one during the day, another during the night, but they're not even carrying extinguishers if something happens.
And there's one more thing that I forgot. They need to check, I think we need to call the fire marshal because they need to check how many extinguishers have in those buildings because I don't know if each building has it.
Ok, otra pregunta que tengo en mente es, estamos enterándonos de que van a remodelar los apartamentos. Cuando eso empiece, van a avisar a todos los residentes con tiempo para otro apartamento afuera, o nos van a dejar ahí. Yo no sé cuáles son las condiciones de los propietarios del Serrano, porque
I also have another question. I understand that there's going to be redevelopment, and I'm concerned about being informed. Are they going to tell us what is going to happen? Are they going to let us search for a place, or just leave us there or kick us out?
We're gonna give you a chance to the other.
Thank you. Gracias.
Buenas noches. El motivo de, soy una persona que vivo en un apartamento serrano, soy residente de un serrano. Tengo.
Good evening. I am a person that also lives in the apartment Serrano, and
El motivo que vengo es porque ya tengo más de 2 años de estar con el problema de la bolsa del aire de la sala.
And the reason I'm coming is because it's been 2 years that I had the problem with the air in my living room.
Come back to.
Y la razón es que si yo lo pongo, hace ruido y sale agua y se me destruye las tablas que están abajo.
And whenever she uses it, water filters from it and ruins the floor and the wood that it's in there.
Okay, it makes a lot of noise. The convector is making a lot of noise and it's throwing a lot of water, and that water is seeping into the floor. They already fixed the floor one time, but she's avoiding to turn on the AC or the heater in that unit because of the noise that it's making and the water that is discharging.
El segundo motivo es que realmente después que se fue la manager Norby, vino esta nueva manager. Esta manager no tiene presentamiento con todos los residentes.
The other motive that I have is the previous manager. She left, and the new manager that is coming is not behaving properly with the tenants.
No tiene comunicación. Ella hace las reuniones cuando realmente los residentes no pueden llegar a las reuniones.
She doesn't have communication with the tenants, and she organizes meetings when it's inconvenient for the tenants.
Casualmente acaba de entrar una persona allá a la oficina que más bien a ella la subió de cargo, se llama Wendy ella. Ahora ella es asistente de la manager y ella da la cara en vez que la de la manager.
And a new person had entered in the office, is Wendy. She's the assistant manager, and she's the only one now that's facing the tenants instead of the manager.
Otro motivo que realmente cuando hace poco yo fui a la cosa a renovar el contrato, y hasta ese día me di cuenta que van a subir el 5%.
Also, recently I went to the office to renew my lease agreement, and I am finding out that it's going to be a rent increase of 5%.
Bien sabe que ahora los trabajos no han subido, en los sueldos. Y realmente para ella tiene dos comunicaciones porque para mí ella trabaja en dos locales de la misma propietaria de Los Serranos. ¿Eh? Ella trabaja en dos partes.
Sí.
Sí, de la residencia, de la madre, sí.
Okay.
The property manager, her name is Nancy, and she works in two places. That's why she's not, always at Serrano's. She works in two different places that's managed by AHC.
And she also indicated that with the cost of living, these rent increases are going to create hardship.
La razón de esto también, de la seguridad, que realmente, casualmente el horario que tienen en esa oficina, trabajan de lunes a viernes. Y si hay alguna emergencia un sábado, no hay oficina abierta.
Also, in the office, it's only open Monday through Fridays. And when there is an emergency on weekends, we have no way of reaching them.
Casualmente, el diciembre de este año que pasó, habían 3 carros que estaban en asunto de droga. Y lo cual yo le dije al de mantenimiento que si estaban buenas las cámaras que están hacia atrás. Y me dijo que Trump había dejado, eso era público, que eso no había ningún problema. Esa fue la respuesta que me dio el de mantenimiento.
December, she recalls there were 3 cars maybe doing drugs or something like that. She talked to maintenance regarding maybe cameras in the area, and the response was that since it was public access, they didn't have any.
No sé realmente cómo vamos a arreglar eso para que en vez que agarre el cargo la manager de presentarse como atender a los residentes, ella anda pegando papeles casi todos los días en la puerta.
And also the manager maybe is only posting papers everywhere instead of dealing with the tenants or helping them.
Bueno,
Gracias.
Thank you. I have a clarifying question.
Yeah.
Actually,
Tiene una.
are you a resident in a CAF unit or a market rate?
¿Usted vive en una de las unidades
sí, señor.
asequibles, okay, o en una de las unidades de mercado?
Okay, that's one thing that I would like to answer. Many of them, when I ask them, they don't know in what, what level they live. I thought they're supposed to be telling by when they apply for the units, they don't tell them. So many of them, they don't know.
Cada vez que se renuevan los contratos de asentamiento,
Yeah, that's right. Market rate.
she will be living in a market rate unit. It's not an affordable unit.
But that's another thing that they don't tell residents, they have these 3 possibilities or these options. No.
Thank you.
Buenas noches, soy residente de Serrano también y gracias por esta oportunidad.
Good evening. I am also a resident of Serrano, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you.
Sí, voy a confirmar.
I'm going to certify that what my colleague, my co-tenant said it's correct?
Verá, a mí no me gusta ir mucho a la oficina, tengo muchas cosas también, pero trato de solucionarlo por no ir.
I don't like to go much to the office. Even when I have problems, I try to solve them by myself instead of going because it's hard to go.
Los motivos son que no tenemos una buena conversación de parte de la manager ahora actualmente.
One of the matters is that we don't have a good response from the manager.
Yo he tenido una experiencia que por motivos de COVID no he podido pagar mis utilidades.
I had an experience that because of the COVID emergency, couldn't pay my utilities.
Entonces me llegó un día una carta indicándome que yo solo tenía 3 días para pagar todo este monto y era alto.
And I received a notification that I had 3 days to pay everything. That was a high amount.
Entonces yo fui a la oficina y pregunté que quería hablar con la manager para cómo hacer.
And I went to the office to see if I could talk to the manager to make arrangements on how to do it.
Y la secretaria de adelante me dice que ella no está y yo tengo que pedir un appointment para hablar con ella.
And the secretary at front told me that the manager wasn't there and she has to make an appointment to see her.
Entonces yo le dije, no puede esperar mucho tiempo, la carta dice en 3 días. Y si ella va a venir, va a esperar mucho, una semana.
And she told the secretary that the letter was for 3 days and it was too long to wait a week to see the manager.
And Hector, sorry, just one point of clarification again. Are we talking about Drucker and Falk, or are we
Yes.
talking about, okay.
Drucker and Falk. Thank you.
Entonces llegó ese día, le acordamos la hora y ella no estaba. Tuve que esperar como 1 hora y media aproximadamente.
And even after making an appointment on the date of the appointment, she wasn't there, and I had to wait for an hour to see her.
Entonces yo le pregunté que por qué me puede explicar esa carta y por qué tengo que pagarla así tan pronto. Y yo estoy consciente.
And she was asking for an explanation or how to make payments because the amount was high and how she could do it.
She wanted to arrange a payment because she had to pay for the medication and the doctor's visit, but she cannot talk to her about that.
Ese era el caso, pero ella salió de la oficina como alterada, diciendo que a todos se les había mandado, que esos son los que tenía que pagar.
She left the office saying that that was for all the tenants and everybody will have to pay.
Entonces yo le digo, yo no puedo. Entonces ella me dijo que si yo no pagara, ella iba a agarrar un abogado y que iba a hacer lo que tenía que hacer.
And after telling her that she couldn't make the payment, she said that a lawyer was going to take matter to solve the situation.
That she was going to contact her lawyer, and the lawyer will do what he has to do in order to get the money from her. That is a scary tactic. And we're talking about a person that she's going through medical issues, and she didn't have money to buy her medicines. Where is the compassion? Where is the affordable?
Entonces yo le dije, yo estoy consciente, voy a pagar, pero denme tiempo.
And I told her, I understand that I own the money, but just need time.
Y me di cuenta que ella no
estaba revisando mis papeles de cuánto a cuánto eran las fechas y empezó a hacer me preguntó en cuántos meses podía, me dijo, 2 meses, no, 3 meses, no, yo puedo 4 meses, es muy alto, es como una renta. Yo solo trabajo con mi esposo, somos una familia pequeña.
And then she got the documentation on how much I own, and she starts saying, are you gonna pay in 2 months, 3 months? And she told her that because the amount is high, she will need more time, maybe 4 months. And it's since it's a small family, and only her and her husband work.
De cierta manera yo me sentí amenazada cuando me iba a llevar a la corte.
And I felt afraid and threatened when she told me that I was going to be taken to court.
Entonces yo le dije, yo puedo ir a la corte. También puedo agarrar un abogado. Ya, entonces ella se calmó un poco.
And then I told her, then I can go to court too, and I will bring a lawyer. And that's when she calmed down
Me aceptó los 4 meses.
and accepted the 4 months for payment.
Y en esta semana la oficina a veces nos cierran los miércoles, pero ayer, el martes, yo fui como de emergencia a pedir un parking cerrado.
And they usually close the office on Wednesdays, but on Tuesday I went to the office because I needed a parking permit, emergencies, and it was also closed.
Porque no es fácil entrar a estos apartamentos, nos piden muchos requisitos, incluso me pidieron a mí que yo tenga un seguro de inquilino.
It's really hard to get into the apartments. They have too many requirements, including the renter's insurance.
Y ahora para renovar, nos van a aumentar, dijeron, en renovación 5%.
And now, again, for renovations, they're going to increase again. 5%.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. I think we have one more
We have one
speaker
more person,
virtually.
Ana.
Sí, hola, buenas noches.
Good evening.
Mi nombre es Ana Ordóñez y soy residente de Serranos hace 18 años.
My name is Ana Ordóñez, and I am a resident of Serrano for 18 years.
Bueno, creo que voy a repetir un poco de lo que los otros residentes han dicho. Nos pasaríamos toda la noche hablando de lo mismo. Pero voy a empezar sobre seguridad.
I will speak the same thing that my the other tenants speak, and we'll be here all night, but I'm going to start with something about security.
Mi pregunta sobre seguridad es, hemos pedido muchas veces que pongan un security porque nos hemos quejado de muchas cosas como gente que llega que no vive ahí en los parqueos de atrás donde no hay cámaras.
We have been asking for a security person because there's always people in the back of the building, and they're doing things there.
Como por ejemplo, hombres llegan a tomar, no les importa si es de día. El otro día tuve una mala experiencia con mi hija de 6 años, la fui a recoger a la escuela. El hombre estaba tomando en el carro, se bajó a hacer pipí y no le importó, me vio caminando de la mano con mi hija y eran las 3 de la tarde.
Like this circumstance where people go there to drink, there was this man there drinking in his car during the day. I was coming back from picking up my daughter from school. She's 6 years old, and the person stepped out of the car and started urinating in the floor.
In front of her
In
and the
front of-
child.
Mi pregunta, I was in English. I asked him like, I'm sorry to say that, but I was like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm running away because I'm scared. I said, oh, he looked my car, he looked me. I run away with my daughter inside. This is not the first time I see people are back on the building because there is no cameras there. We always request the cameras, security, and we feel like you're just listening, and we are. They don't care about us. They ignoring whatever we talk, and I feel really scared about security because people just go inside the building, drinking, smoking marijuana. We have kids, even not only kids, the younger kids. My son, my first one is 18 years old. He started working, he come late, and people just running outside. I'm scared when he come back to work. I'm watching him, I'm calling always saying, where you are? Are you almost close to home? And this is a big problem. Y la otra cosa es sobre las alarmas. He escuchado también de que está una persona en el lobby y recién me enteré que es porque no hay alarmas en el edificio y que el otro día una secadora creo quiso prender fuego y entonces no sabemos qué está pasando en el edificio.
And also, in regard to the alarms, I just found out that there's a person in the lobby that it's there for the alarms. I wasn't aware that the alarms were not working. There was this issue in the laundry room. It seems that there was a sort of an incident and we weren't aware of that.
A dryer was about to catch fire.
Escucho también que ustedes dicen que han mejorado muchas cosas. Sí, pero no al 100%. Otra de las cosas que nos gustaría es que ustedes mismos vayan y toquen nuestras puertas y verifiquen ustedes mismos con sus propios ojos qué es lo que realmente o cómo, en qué condiciones nosotros vivimos con nuestros hijos. Y ahí es donde ustedes mismos se podrán dar cuenta y decir, yo fui y yo estoy diciendo que sí hemos mejorado, tal vez no el 100%, pero tal vez un 50 o un 60%.
You're also saying that things have improved. I would like to say that you need to come and see for yourself, knock on our doors and check the conditions that we're living at and our children too. So then you can be sure of what you're doing is right or not and see the conditions we're living at.
But she's inviting you guys, the commissioners.
He escuchado también de que dijeron de que habían dado $50 de gift card por el problema que tuvimos de los elevadores. Y sí, los dieron porque yo mismo fui a la oficina a decirles a las managers que qué estaban haciendo para compensarnos si nos iban a quitar un mes de utilidades o nos iban a descontar de la renta por casi un mes que estuvimos con el problema de los elevadores. Entonces, ¿qué fue lo que ellos hicieron? Darnos una burla y darnos $50 de un gift card.
And you also mentioned that they gave us a gift card, and I went to the management office during the time we weren't with elevators and asked what you were going to do to compensate, and you'll laugh at us and just gave us a small $50 card.
Mi otra pregunta es sobre de que hemos escuchado de que nos van a aumentar el monto de renta, pero hemos escuchado que es un porcentaje muy alto, como dentro de $100 hasta $200. Y la pregunta es, ¿en qué entonces son o cómo ustedes le llaman affordable house? Si van a aumentar un porcentaje muy alto, como dijo la otra señora. Nosotros en los trabajos no nos dan aumento de acuerdo a ustedes nos aumenten de renta. y la vida está muy cara hoy en día. Entonces, ¿qué vamos a preferir? ¿Pagar renta o tener comida para nuestros hijos?
And also, I heard from another tenant that they're going to increase the rent maybe in $100 or $200. And they should understand that the cost of living, it's getting worse. We're not getting rent raise increases. So what are we going to do? Are we going to pay the rent or feed our children?
Porque nosotros estamos pagando, bueno, yo por lo menos estoy pagando utilidades separadas y la renta también. Entonces, me gustaría, ya que veo que hay muchas personas ahí, ahorita que nos están escuchando, que por favor chequen antes sí de subir. Nosotros entendemos que año con año tienen que aumentar, pero esa cantidad es muchísimo. Y nosotros lamentablemente trabajamos, sí, porque trabajamos, pero no ganamos un salario, lo cual ustedes ganan para poder pagar ese costo de renta muy alto.
I understand that they're going to increase the rent, and I understand the reason why they're going to do it, but they should think that the rent shouldn't be that high, the rent increase shouldn't be that high, or salaries are not increasing, and you should come and see we are not making the same salaries that you may be making, and that's the reason we ask for your consideration.
Y gracias, Ana.
Y sí, gracias a ustedes.
Thank you very much. So before we get into discussion and questions, not to put you on the spot, Nikki, but I think you attended the resident meeting last month. Did you have anything you wanted to share based on your attendance at that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed to be a decent discussion. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. It seemed to be a decent discussion. I definitely heard issues about cameras and security. You know, they talked about doing more resident-centric events. I will say that the vibes or feeling around the meeting were rather positive, but the attendance wasn't super great. I don't remember the exact count. I would have brought my notes. I should have brought my notes. But overall, it seemed positive. But a lot of the issues that were echoed here tonight were also echoed, particularly security, some lacking resident events. Another big thing I noticed was like animal feces in the hallways was mentioned.
Thank you. Well, first, I just want to thank both AHC as well as the tenants from the Toronto, as well as the advocates for coming tonight to speak about this. I know it's not easy, especially for our residents to speak out publicly and give up time to be here and speak on the record. So we very much appreciate you taking the time to provide us with your insight and experiences at the Toronto. So I have a couple of questions, and I'm sure other commissioners do as well. And I also want to give Ann Venetia a chance to speak if she would like as well. But just first, burning question that I had regarding the fire alarm. So that was new information for me. So are none of the fire alarms working in at least one of the buildings in this Toronto, or are just some of the fire alarms not working?
Some of the fire alarms in the 39 building are not. The elevator alarms are working, some of the pools are working, but they cannot identify which ones are exactly working. Fire marshal came to do the annual fire inspection, I would say it was last week or the week before on a Friday, and he put the property, that building, on fire watch. So we've had 2 people in that building since then. And the fire panel that they need to replace is like the original fire panel. Mm-hmm. And I did just receive one proposal to AHC to approve so we can get that panel replaced.
Okay. I didn't know fire watches were a thing. And that meets code?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
What is a fire watch?
So you have to, somebody just walk
walks around the building the whole evening and see if there's anything that's alarming to them. They have to call 911 and evacuate the building.
And just, and I can speak from experience because I have dealt with properties that are on fire watch, just like this. And they're not there to put out a fire. They are there to call 911, just like an alarm doesn't put out a fire.
Sure.
They're just there to alarm that a fire may be starting or whatever.
Is
And
another
they do meet code.
is another potential temporary fix for that just giving store-bought smoke alarms to residents, so at least they have a working fire alarm until the overall system. I assume it's all wired in together. Is that something that you guys have looked at? Just especially if people are concerned about how would I know if there's a fire because there's no alarm, and what if that person isn't on my floor or walking around in my vicinity when something happens?
There are alarms in the building and there's smoke detectors by code in each apartment home. And the amount of smoke detectors are based upon the bedroom size. So there are alarms that will go off in the building. They just will not notify the fire department.
Okay, thank you for that.
There are
clarification.
alarms that will be going off, and especially in the elevators, I'm sorry, I'm not that technical with it, but they're called smoke type of things that will go off if anything happened in the elevator.
Okay, so from a resident standpoint, if there was a fire in their unit, they would still have an alarm go off to alert them? Okay, so that makes more sense then, that it's just the 911. Go ahead, Doris.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about this because for a building that old, usually my understanding is the alarms are only in the hallways and not in the units. In fact, because my building was built in 2, so I thought the state code required at least in the buildings, but I also wanted to add, I think your idea of individual smoke alarms, hopefully the ones that are hardwired, so that they're less likely to run out of battery. Because I have one in mind. Maybe a nuisance, but it's a pleasurable nuisance when it goes off. I mean,
Janet?
I have a question. I know I was there yesterday. The guy who was there between before 4 o'clock, very nice person, nice. When I was coming out, there was another person in there, right? He had the music very loud. His feet was on top of that piece of wood that you guys put it as a table, and he was laid back and with the music very loud. So I don't know, is that also code that a person to be on a fire watch to be acting that way?
Of course not. So
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it's good for us to know that.
That's what we see things like that. Who is in there checking, people that you guys hire somebody, who is checking on people like, third-party people doing in the building? And I observed myself, they didn't tell me because I wanted to check.
Anyone at any time can observe things that you would not like to see, so I'm glad that you told me. And the maintenance team do walk around the building, the office team walk around the building, and when they see something like that, they correct it. And actually, when I leave here tonight, I will call the company and let them know what's going on, because they shouldn't have music on. That's not what they're for.
Exactly. And then in front of their eyes, they installed a package that they were there when they installed that package, And also, you're talking about the maintenance. There was another guy there, Genaro. He had a very bad attitude with the residents. He was, when people were asking for something in their units, they said, we don't have money. Like the money was coming from his pocket. And then he created a lot of fear on residents, that guy, Genaro. Okay? One time I called him, he told me to call him Mr. G. Not Genaro. When I say Genaro, no, call me Mr. G. So you cannot have people like that working, with families. They are immigrants, their families, they are afraid of things, coming another Hispanic guy and ask him to call him Mr. G.
That person no longer is at the property.
Oh, I'm glad, thank you.
How long is it gonna take, before the fire marshals come back out, problem is resolved? Like, what's the time length that they gave you?
They didn't give us an exact time length because they know that that panel is not something that's readily available. So we're in contact with the fire marshal. They know what's continuing to go on and what action we are taking. And once the new panel goes in, then they'll come back out and test that panel.
So you'll have someone there for the whole duration?
For the
So it
whole-
can take up to 2 months?
It doesn't matter. We have to have a fire.
Okay. No, I'm glad you do. I'm just saying that how long it's gonna take to get
Yes,
this
it's-
back up code.
We have to have a fire watch.
Sabrina, if you don't mind me asking a question. So that our residents know what to expect from the fire watch. I know that they have a station downstairs where they're sitting, right? But how often are they supposed to be doing rounds? We know there's 8 floors in the building, but
Every hour, they're supposed to get up and walk through that building.
through all 8 floors.
All
That'd
8
be-
floors.
How do you know that they're complying with that, the person that you have sit there? How do you know that they're doing rounds? Do you have documentation?
They're required, the fire marshal actually gave us the forms to have filled out.
Can you please notify the residents that the same fear that you asked, Kellen, I talked to them about that if they know what's gonna happen, because yesterday they said, we don't have fire alarm here, so what's gonna happen? And if it's a fire here. So I said the system that is probably down, I was guessing, is the one is connected to the fire department, right? That alert that is fire. But you have, I checked, they have the smoke alarm in there. They have this will sound if they're gonna spot, fire or something, but they don't know. Can you just explain them that they not to be in fear or sleeping, not sleeping at all, or thinking we're gonna have fire any moment. Like the other day, almost the dryer caught fire. So please explain to them, nicely, and let them know that you are safe. Because you have a smoke alarm in your unit. Some are working, some are not working. But we expect this time for you guys to get back with the fire thing or whatever you're gonna do. But explain to people. Don't just post it, notice that we don't have alarms for now. What the people are gonna take from that notice?
We did post a different, we did post a different notice, but that's the first notice that we posted is what the fire marshal gave us, and we were required to post it around the entire property.
So has an individual communication been sent out to each resident in that building that, to say, here's the status, the, fire alarm is down, your smoke alarms are unaffected by this? Or is it just notices versus communication to individual residents?
So we put out a notice on every door, and it did talk about the fire alarm. I don't remember exactly what it says.
Okay.
And I do know that it didn't say your smoke alarm in your apartment still works. So that's something that we will put out to them.
With regard to the smoke alarms, I'm just, because we're talking about smoke alarms, like, I know with resident services, we talk a lot about like just helping residents and also helping residents, sometimes they're thinking about sanitation, be, good residents, right? And providing assistance. Is there a reminder like, hey, it's 6 months, check the batteries, things like that? Maybe this would be a good time to be like, hey, your personal smoke detectors, which are battery operated, let's get that taken care of right now as well.
We check them quarterly.
Oh, you check them quarterly?
Check them,
Okay,
because
well then that.
we
my
go-
question.
In every unit.
In the unit, you check.
In
them.
every unit, we have to.
Oh, okay,
We check the filters and we check the smoke
Okay.
detectors. And we have
great,
notes on when we check them.
great, okay.
And even the fire stops that are underneath the microwave or fire, we check the fire stop dates.
Sabrina, one question regarding
Or
you just mentioned about the filters. I heard from residents that the filter type changed compared to the previous one, the blue one. The filter for the convectors, they were blue, right? Now they are white. It appears that the quality is very low on that one. Can you check also why they changed that?
I was just with them, so when I was with them, the ones that we had were blue. So I don't know, because what they do, because the age of the convectors, what they have to do is take out the filter, cut out the old filter, and they cut, like they have a whole batch of filters, and they cut them to fit that. I was with them, I only saw blue filters.
Yeah.
So I will
Can
see
you
this,
check,
of
please?
course,
Because they talk about the quality of the filters is different.
I will check.
Okay, thank you.
I have a totally different question. It was about one of your slides. And she made a point about the, disinforming the residents about your consideration of renovating. Do you have a time frame so they know to prepare or just to be, just for preparation? Either way you go, whether you renovate or rebuild.
We want to make it, our plan to get residents involved up front in terms of what it is we want to do. And our sense is between now and let's say maybe September, we would have a better sense of where we're going to go and the team. Then we're going to try to do similar to what we did with ABT West and ABT East, and that is, bring residents into the process and let them know what we do. Now, at the end of the day, it really is based upon what we can afford. We know even with the renovation, there's going to be a gap, and we have to figure out how we can finance that gap. And if we do a rebuild, I mean, that gap doubles it, not triples. We just have to figure out how to put the right things together.
Doris, you had a question?
Yeah, it was prompted by the discussion of fire alarms and so do you send notices out about replacement of the filters on a regular basis, or do you have a newsletter that reminds people? Do they come to the office, or what are they supposed to do? Because when you have vectors that in a more ancient heating and air conditioning system, I think it's something like 1 month or at least every 3 months you have to replace them. And then I'm wondering if you have annual convector cleaning, and how do you communicate with residents if you're going to come in and check the smoke alarms? Or do you schedule it and say we're going to be on floors 1 through 6 on day 1, and we're going to be on floors 6 through 9 on days the next day, and blah blah blah. Do you do that, and do you put these things under people's doors, or do you force them to rely on posted notices on the doors or in a mail room or something?
So we post it quarterly on their doors and around on the mail rooms and the laundry rooms, and we send out a text. And we let them know ahead of time, and it's usually a week time span that we'll go into their homes. We can't give them an exact date because we don't know when we go in how long it's going to take. Because they take off the filter, the convector cover, they take out the filter, change the filter inside the container, and vacuum out the actual.
It's a convector cleaning, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
they clean out the convector, and then they even put a belt-like pill in it to help with the condensation line to keep it from being clogged. And they do that on a quarterly basis.
And are the notices in Spanish and English?
Yeah.
And I just want to, and I don't remember if we did this or not, and forgive me if we didn't, but did you all get a chance to introduce yourself? Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. I just want to make sure, especially for the people online who probably can't see you, that at some point we had introduced the age. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I have some questions and some comments because I also want to be mindful of our time. First off, yeah, Paul, great to meet you in person finally. Thank you for all your comments and for all your colleagues here as well. Some of them I know and some of them I'm getting to know, so I appreciate that. Of course, our wonderful advocates, thank you very much, and to our residents for being here. Very much appreciated. Saul, as always, Janet. I think I got everybody there. So I was going through and I was listing what I considered kind of like the issues that we're really talking about here. And Paul spoke to several of them, which are really like, actual physical issues. So obviously the heat and water issues, which Paul covered in the presentation, a lot of that's structural. And this is an old building. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm not speaking for anybody other than myself, but I can't imagine AHC thought that they'd be in this position when they bought it. But here we are. Things change, circumstances change. We have high interest rates. It's a challenging building. I'm not providing excuses, but it is a reality, and that's what AHC has communicated. Heat and water issues, the elevator issues as well, which Paul spoke to, right, and it being up for quite some time. That's frustrating. We talked about the fire alarms here. Security concerns are something that I'd like to hear a little bit more about, kind of what's being done on the security front. If some of you folks could speak to that in a second here. So those are kind of not hard issues, but hard issues, kind of the soft issues, which really are the difficult issues. I think are really about communication and trust. It sounds like, this is. So I chaired this commission obviously for a few years. And we had 4 meetings on the Serrano back in 2021, 2 years ago. Many of you folks were here or virtually for that, and a lot of that was speaking to issues, of trust, and those issues absolutely remain. I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of work has been done, and I think a lot of our advocates and residents have acknowledged the work where it's been done, but have also been telling some hard truths about where we need to do better and HC needs to do better. We're certainly appreciative of new leadership coming in, and Paul and members of his team to invigorate. But certainly it seems like we need to do more work there. So I'm trying to kind of frame this in a way of like action items, basically. So this commission makes recommendations, and we have hearings, and I always felt like our power was having a public hearing. And so I'm thankful Kellen scheduled this and you all were able to attend. But ultimately, we make recommendations. AHC takes action as the property owner. The county takes action as an overseeing and being a partner there. So where am I going with this? So I would like to hear from Ann if she can speak to kind of what the county is doing on its end. I'm personally not opposed to us, reconvening and following up on this. I will say I hope that that's not necessary because I think these are the conversations that should be able to had, not always in a public setting, between AHC and residents and advocates. My one ask for AHC tonight is, I've heard from many folks that Drucker and Falk has not a lot of advocates in the building, or there's been a lot of issues there. There's certainly been a lot of disrespect. That is my ask of you. I do feel like, if not for advocates, we wouldn't be here. Like we had housing commission meetings, other groups stepped in, but if not for advocates, if not for the residents themselves, no change would have ever happened. And so we can't, that just can't be happening. That's unacceptable, in my opinion. If we're telling folks they can't come into the building and there can't be communication, we can't ever rebuild trust. So that has definitely got to stop. I think that you all, meaning AHC, really are genuine in trying to build and regain, and however you want to phrase it, that trust. That trust is I keep saying that word, but it is so paramount, right? And I think there's a lot there, but obviously there's more work to do. So I think that's an initial step. We just can't be having that. Obviously, the other ask is with Drucker and Falk. If you're not doing it already, we need the best people you can put there from just like a communication standpoint. It's a very tough labor market. So I can't imagine that it's easy to get people and to keep fully staffed. But I think that would be my ask. this is such a paramount kind of issue right now, this property in particular. So those are kind of those two asks of you there. We certainly can write a letter to all of this, right? And my ask of the county is we certainly need to get some concrete updates on the recommendations that this commission has made, as well as the county has made to do things differently. But then B, if this is where I put Ann on the spot, but if I could ask Ann to maybe just speak to some of the things maybe the county has been doing. I'm not expecting a full presentation of all of the recommendations, but I'm trying to frame this for you so you can speak to some of the things the county's been doing.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm happy to speak to that. So I'm Ann Venezia. I'm the housing director for Arlington. I'd like to echo Eric's thanks to everyone who's spoken tonight. It's been a really helpful meeting just to hear both what AHC is doing and also to hear directly from the residents as well. So thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to share some of the work that the county is doing. So again, also echoing Eric, I want to be mindful of time. I know we're in hour 2 of this item. But I do want to share a couple of things that the county is doing more broadly across the whole portfolio, and that is in the spirit of implementing the CAF strategies that the county released last April. And then I also want to hone in a little bit and speak specifically to some of the things that we're doing in response to the concerns that we've heard at the Serrano. So starting just, again, broadly in terms of what we're working on, the county, for those of you who are a little newer to the conversation, in April 2022, we did publish our long-term strategies for improved oversight and tenant support at aging CAF properties. It's a mouthful, but basically it includes 17 strategies. It spans 5 work areas, and it really, at the heart of it, is trying to prescribe how we can improve our oversight of our properties in our portfolio, and also to really provide stronger tenant supports for those who are, those residents who are living at these properties. And so I don't want to steal the thunder of staff who will be sharing a full report on this in May, but I can highlight a few things that we have been able to do in implementing these strategies since last April. We've made significant progress in several areas. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight is since the completion of the report last April, we have increased our inspections capacity from 5% of the overall CAF portfolio to 20% of the portfolio annually. That's really significant, I will say, especially given that the number of CAF units has increased by 28% in the last couple of years. So basically, we've added almost 3,000 units, and at the same time, we increased our inspections capacity from 5% to, again, about 20%. So it went from a few hundred a year to now this year, we're anticipating over 2,000. And so when we did that in about 11 months' time, which for those of you who have ever worked for government, that is extremely fast. So I really appreciate the, yes, Colin.
Sorry, point of clarification on that. I know we're
Sure.
going to talk about the budget a little bit later tonight, or directly after this. So that was the $150,000 allowed us to move to the 20% inspection. If that money is taken away, does staff capacity go back to 5%? Or essentially, if we don't continue that funding, what is that capacity become moving forward?
Sure. Yeah. So through the budget process last year, the board did approve it. Actually, it was 150,000 plus an additional 50 of ARPA money. And Marie will, she can address more of these questions later tonight during the budget presentation. But that did enable, to your question, that did enable us to expand our inspections capacity because we hired it out. We were able to get a third-party inspections firm under contract, and that happened within the last 4 weeks. So we did a competitive procurement. We were able to get someone under contract, and within a matter of maybe 2 weeks of getting the contract signed, we're starting these inspections. And so that is work that is underway this month that we're getting going. So again, the staff who has worked on that, they have spent an enormous amount of time getting all of that work together, software, in order to enable the inspections, as well as the third party, getting the schedule together. It's been an enormous lift, and I'm really grateful to them for the work that they've done on that. We also, as a result of last year's budget process, we were given an additional FTE to hire a staff person that focuses specifically on unit compliance and related strategies, resident experience and so on. And so we're in the process of hiring for that position. So stay tuned for that. But again, that is something that we're hoping can really expand our capacity in this area. And the last effort that I want to highlight is we really do take to heart how we can receive feedback from residents, and that there may be barriers to residents calling the county directly. And so trying to figure out how else we can hear from residents what their experience is. And so with the help of Saul, thank you, and Bugata, we are using one-time funding to do 400 to 500 surveys / focus groups to reach households of residents who are living in our CAF units to learn more about the resident experience and to hear directly from residents what additional supports may be helpful. And so, again, we really appreciate Saul and his team. And it's, again, another enormous lift, and it's taking months of work from them. So, again, we really do appreciate their partnership with that. And we're really excited to see the information that we receive back. So those are just some highlights of some of the CAF strategies that we've already begun to implement. There are many, many more. Again, stay tuned for the May meeting. I'll put in a plug for that, where we'll share additional examples of the work that's been underway this last year. But I do share that to illustrate that, at least from the county side, there hasn't been the foot off the pedal, and I hope that that isn't the impression that folks have. We've been working extremely hard, again, with the resources that we have, to do a great amount of implementation across an enormous body of work in a very short period of time. So again, I'm really grateful to the staff who've been a part of that. In the last few seconds that I have here, I do want to focus in on Serrano specifically. And I do want to share that we have been very focused on the feedback that the advocates shared during or in January through their letter, as well as other conversations that we've had and what we've heard through these meetings. And here are some specific actions that we are taking in order to follow up on this feedback that we've heard. As several of you, I think, are aware, or many of you are aware, we have included Serrano on our inspection schedule currently for April. And that allows time for HC to complete the 100% unit inspections that Paul mentioned earlier. And, I think they still have some units that they're trying to inspect. And so we wanted to provide enough time that they could finish their inspections, give residents a little bit of a break before our inspections team goes in. I think for those folks who've been through inspections before, there's someone in your unit. And so we wanted to provide a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a break in between those 2 rounds of inspections. So again, we are scheduled for April. And then we had staff attend the February meeting that I know one of the commissioners was able to attend as well, which is fantastic. And we're working with HC to confirm future resident meetings so that staff can continue to attend and hear, again, directly from residents, which is always so helpful. Any thoughts, concerns, praise, whatever the case may be, whatever is on their mind that they're able and comfortable sharing during those meetings. And so that's another way that we're able to hear about the resident experience specifically at Serrano. So those are just a couple of things that I wanted to share, again, specific to that property. And just the last thing that I'll say is we've talked a lot, especially in these forums, of communication channels that are available to residents and also to advocates to share concerns about what's going on. And I know some of the conversation tonight is how can we best work with residents who maybe aren't comfortable using those channels. And so I do want to offer that it is something that we are focused on as part of our CAF strategies. We haven't solved it. We really welcome ideas from folks who are in the room, from residents, from advocates. If you have thoughts, ideas on, how we as the county and our role can provide a welcoming avenue, a channel for residents to share what's on their mind. And specifically, if they do have any concerns about a property in our portfolio, we really would love to hear those concerns and work with you on that. And we'll continue working on our end as well. But I do want to put that offer out there that we have not fully solved it, as I think a few folks mentioned tonight, and we are open to hearing ideas. So unless folks have questions, I'm happy to stop there. I know that was a lot of information.
Thank you, Anne. I think, Eric, you actually posed a question for HC2 in your series of questions and statements.
Let's see here. What did I ask? Oh, it was the security. It was the security. Several of the residents talked about security being concerns. And I know I'm familiar with the property, so there's like drive coming up. So
all insurance. So in terms of our whole portfolio, we're doing security scans of our properties.
Yeah.
And Serrano certainly is on the list, and it's at the higher end of the list. We've gone through a couple of properties in Arlington already. We've made certain changes and updates to our security systems in terms of the quality of camera, what the camera can see, even putting cameras, on the roof. And in addition to looking at being able to install artificial intelligence to be able to understand who's coming in and sort of facial recognition, all those things. So we have to go through a security scan first, figure out what's needed, and then respond. The other thing that over the last 6 months, I've been in conversation with more with the deputy chief of police and more recently with the chief of police. And we're looking, there are a couple of properties in Arlington where we're really trying to push for courtesy officers. And so we hope to have some news coming back that we have the ability to put courtesy officers in a number of our buildings, Serrano again being on the list as well.
So thank you, Paul. I guess follow up for me on that. My hackles kind of go up when I hear about potentially having police officers more present in a building, especially that's minority residents. Definitely understand the security concerns. I'm wondering, has AHC or Drucker and Falk started going to the residents either by convening meetings specifically about security, the issues that people are facing, and sort of community solutions to like what can all of us do within the buildings to try to make a safer environment? And what is that? Because it's a shared responsibility. It's not just AHC, it's not just Drucker and Falk, it's the residents themselves have a role to play in the security environment as well. But have you guys sort of started that process?
So we've not started that process, but that's actually, we want to make sure that it's a possibility with the chief of police first. What we've done in the other communities, or at least one of the other communities, is we actually brought it up in a resident meeting, and the residents preferred, as opposed to anything else, they preferred to have officers present. We would do the same thing, at the Serrano. We wouldn't put officers in until we had a conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely would recommend, trying to have that dialogue, first and walking through what are some solutions. Because even with cameras and facial recognition, I think my concern with that is a year or two down the road, we're going to have people coming back and saying there's over policing, there's too much security, and now we're penalizing all these black and brown folks within the building for things, and it's unfair. And I see that in other places where, especially cameras are brought in, that becomes a concern, and then people go back to, well, what are some other solutions that we can use to try to address these issues that doesn't lead to kids who are causing trouble, but we don't necessarily want to send them to jail or prison for that, to address those issues in a way that doesn't necessarily lead through the criminal justice system. But again, I think if there's a way to have those conversations with residents and, whether that's community conversations or focus groups or things to figure out, what can residents as well as AHC, as well as the property management firm do to address this issue, and have people sort of share that responsibility to ensure that it's a safe environment.
And I think that's a good idea, to have a security-focused tenant meeting, Paul, so that you hear it directly from the residents on what is it that they want, so that you're not just making decisions from the top down, but you also hear, I'm always advocating for having the residents, their input in everything. That's what I was telling about the redevelopment as well. So that is something that we hear a lot from residents, concerns about security. be in the hallways or around the buildings, behind the buildings and all that. But who knows better than you guys, other than people who actually live there? So I think it would be a good idea to have a security-focused meeting about this around.
I think, I don't want this to come off as disrespectful, it's not, but it's 9:15. Yeah, I do feel like we do need to move on. So I think we need to figure out like how we're gonna end this conversation right now and then continue it. So the plan is that Ann and staff are gonna do a presentation in May, is that right? May on the recommendation. So I think that's a good place to resume the public conversation, right, at the commission level. But that certainly, I think the conversations really shouldn't be necessarily kind of having to come to the housing commission. I think it's good in some ways, but I think ultimately this is not solved in this room. This is solved day-to-day, one-on-one conversations, right? So I would recommend that we can write a letter explaining what we talked about tonight, but I really think we should just continue this conversation, at least today, with staff. That's all I got.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Doris.
Can I just add that whatever recommendations you make, particularly writing, but even here, I'm really super disturbed about the testimony regarding the elevators. And because that, when we looked at that and when the subcommittee looked at it and wrote it up, and staff said at the very beginning that they asked code enforcement and they were in violation of code enforcement and the ADA. And so that's a matter of safety and lives and access as well. And it sounds like it's gotten even worse because people are having to wait even longer and they can't even get out of the building to go to work or do any basic errands, let alone evacuation. And the other thing I want to mention related to that is if there were a fire or some kind of big emergency, I think that those buildings need to be equipped with at all times evacuation chairs for those people who can't ambulate.
And I'll add to, so in the meeting, Paul, that we had previously, I had made a series of recommendations or things for that I thought the AC should consider around sort of the fears around retaliation, around the elevator issue, and potentially is there a way to move populations that are living on higher floors to different units, so when the elevators do go out that they're not as impacted. We talked about some of the communication concerns. I know I've shared information with Jen about sort of doing an equity framework to look at, who's impacted, how are they impacted, what are the barriers specific populations face within the unit. I didn't see necessarily responses to those things in the presentation tonight, but it would be good to know, are those areas that AHC is exploring or continuing? I think part of the frustration, within the commission can be, we have conversations and meetings, we make recommendations, and then we don't see anything that comes from that. So it'd be great to see some more follow-up specifically on some of those recommendations. Again, to Eric's point, we can put them formally in a letter, but I think it'd be helpful to know, is there more happening on some of those? Because I think the lack of trust and the communication are, they continue to be very concerning to me. That's been an ongoing issue at the Serrano. And again, I know that AHC has taken steps to address those issues, and I applaud AHC for the efforts that they have already put in place to try to improve those, but clearly more needs to be done, and the process has not been, fixed yet, at least for some residents. And so I think going more in depth into, what AHC thinks that looks like in the future, I think would be really helpful. And, happy to have another conversation offline about what that could look like. But yeah, and I don't know if the commission wants to sort of memorialize some recommendations or things that we can put in a letter over the next week or so, to AHC, or we just, want to have another conversation in the future, but I do think there's some items that it would be nice to get some more follow-up from HC on, steps being taken to address some of the longer standing issues.
I personally would appreciate if you put it in a letter, it formalizes it, and holds our feet to the fire, and makes us accountable.
Okay.
All right, so let's do this. Sorry, former chair coming out. I'm gonna make a motion. All right, I'm gonna motion that we basically, I'll work with you, Colin, and we'll that's from Alex. I motion that Colin sends out a letter under our commission's name that essentially memorializes the conversation. It's not, the letter is less a set of recommendations and more really a memorialization of the conversation that was had. And there, in that there were specific suggestions and things of that ilk. But it's really just to memorialize the conversation beyond the notes that we have typically. So that's my motion. Have a second? Second. Oh, great. Okay.
Thank you. And I'll just say any objection. That passes unanimously. Thank you again. Thank you to AHC. Thank you to our advocates and our residents for coming out tonight. Very much appreciate you giving up this time this evening.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Bye, Jack.
Don't take it.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, that's what
Have a good night. Okay, next we have a presentation from staff on the Affordable Housing Ordinance overview. So they've actually broken this into half in consideration. Thank you very much. Of having a pretty packed agenda tonight.
Thank you. Russell Denau Schroeder, Principal Planner with the Housing Division. As Chair said, this is going to be a two-parter. Tonight we're going to talk, as part of your purview is Housing Commission UC site plan projects that come in, and they'll talk about two components of that oftentimes, the base and the bonus. I'm here to talk to you about the Affordable Housing Ordinance, and that only pertains to the base. So tonight, it's all about the base. What we're going to do.
Sorry.
Russell, is that microphone working?
I can switch.
I don't know if he really meant that as we were thinking it.
You know what? I'm punchy. I know Russell was at the planning commission late last night, so I think we're a little punchy.
This is missing
Like Megan Trainor here.
So what we're going to cover tonight is the land use planning environment in Arlington, the prehistory of the ordinance, the substance of the ordinance, and the results of the ordinance to date, and some analysis around the ordinance itself. So next slide and the next one. Next. There we go. So as far as the land use environment, the guiding document that really establishes what the vision for the future development of the county is the general land use plan. The plan establishes the overall character, the extent and location of various uses, and serves as the guide for decision-making for future development. So you see lots of nice little colors. The plan is a policy document. So underneath this policy document, go to the next slide, there's also a policy up there. Sector and area plans. So sector and area plans are focused on very specific geographies within the county. They may have recommendations that exceed what the general land use plan has in its adopted form. And so when projects come in, they may be requesting a change in their GLUB designation consistent with the sector plan, but we don't change the GLUB when that sector plan is adopted. And that is a benefit to when it comes to affordable housing, which at next month you'll learn more about that. And so next, more policy there. And so where the rubber hits the road and where the ordinance lies is in the Arlington County zoning ordinance. And this is, if you click once, this is law. So the other ones are policy. The zoning ordinance is the local law for what can be done and regulates how things are built. So it regulates uses, lot sizes, coverage, building height, bulk, siting, parking requirements, density for each district. And each district allows a certain type of development. Some districts, and this is what you see here, may allow special exceptions through the use permit or site plan process. So you got the zoning will, in say a C3 zone, it will say you can do this by right in this zone. But you can also, through a special exception, get even more, do even more. And so it encourages people to build beyond what that minimal thing is that's allowed in the zoning, the by right, but allows a path that's also prescribed elsewhere in the zoning called site plan. So I'm going to make stuff up here and say that by right, maybe you could get 3 stories of a building, but if you do this other shiny thing that we call special exception site plan, you can get 10 stories on that lot. Well, most people are going to say, it's more advantageous for me to build that 10-story. And generally, the sector plan will also say, we want you to build, our vision for that area is to have this other type of development. So the cap of the zoning really, it provides these 2 paths, by right and site plan. So what's going to come to you is site plan projects.
And Russell, I had a question about that slide. So it says by right, administrative approval by staff. I'm assuming that there's basically like a set of criteria that if it meets this, staff can't say no, or is there discretion to?
That's correct. So all the things that are listed there, the lot size, the coverage, the building height, the bulk, all that stuff, that's going to be defined somewhere in the zoning. And if you meet that, you're good to go. That just goes up to the 10th floor and they sign off on it. There's no review by anybody. But that's going to be for lower density types of building. Higher density is going to always pretty much be through site plan. We'll go to the next slide. So before we advance too much farther, some basic jargon that's used in zoning. GFA, gross floor area. So all the square footage within a building. If a building is 100 feet by 100 feet, that's 1,000 square feet. And if it's 10 stories, that's 10,000 square feet. So that would be its gross floor area, everything that's in there. The floor area ratio, FAR, is the ratio of that total gross floor area to the size of the lot that property is on. So there's some, you click once. So 1 FAR, or 1 floor area ratio, on the left, if it's a 1-story building, it covers every square inch of that lot. But if it covers half the lot, maybe there's a plaza or something else, it would take 2 stories to meet that 1 FAR. And if it's on a quarter of that lot, for whatever reason, it would be 4 stories. And then multiplied by however many FAR. Click again. So it's 2 FAR, twice that. Alex will send these out or post them so you'll have them for your reference. So the Affordable Housing Ordinance history. How did we get here? So the county's affordable housing policy was really kind of came out at the early 2000s. There was a housing roundtable at the end of the 90s, around 1999. There was the redevelopment of Arna Valley, which caused an immense loss of affordable housing. And so there was a real urgency to get our heads together and figure out what are we going to do to make sure that we continue to have affordable housing for our community into the future. And so a group got together, I think Christian Dorsey was even on that group. And they came up with a number of goals. And then a few years later, added to those goals targets for those goals. So one of those goals and the associated target was to encourage for-profit developers to provide at least 10% all new units in residential site plans as affordable. So that was a goal. And then the next step was to kind of make that a little bit more solid. So in 2004, the county board adopted affordable housing guidelines for site plan projects. And that was adopted as part of the general land use plan. It was a note on the map. It said if you're in metro areas, there is the expectation that 10% of the gross floor area will be affordable units. Shortly after that, the county got sued by a developer and was taken to court, and the county did not prevail in that. And so in 2005, the board said, well, we're going to abide by the law of Virginia, and everything that we do is going to abide, but we're going to establish a roundtable and work out a resolution for how we provide affordable housing in site plan projects going forward. And what came out of that was the Affordable Housing Ordinance, which was adopted in December 2005, and was codified by the state legislature in the spring of 2006. So you'll often hear that, that the board can't really change the ordinance, and that's true. Not until the state. So we'll take state action first before the board can do anything to change the ordinance. Next slide. Okay. So what is the affordable housing? There is no place, if you Google affordable housing ordinance, you'll probably get something from our webpage or something, but it's actually a part of the Arlington County Zoning Code, section 15.5.8. And next week we'll talk about the bonus, or next month, the bonus, which is 15.5.9. It applies to site plan projects, so only site plan projects. So projects that are coming in saying, I want that extra density that's allowed through site plan. And the floor area ratio is greater than 1.0. Generally, the zoning will allow pretty much 1.0. So it's only projects that exceed that. And when we get to the formula, you'll see why as well. It applies, and this is really key and important, it applies to both residential and commercial uses. So some places have ordinances that are inclusionary or whatnot, and it applies to residential. Ours applies to both residential and commercial. Obviously, through commercial projects, we're not getting any units, but we do the not insubstantial amount of revenue that comes into the county. So the substance of the ordinance is that as a condition for a site plan, a developer needs to have an affordable housing plan. And they can comply with the ordinance through one of four means. And it's entirely the developer's choice which means they choose. Part of the problem that the county got itself into with the lawsuit was the county argued that it was voluntary, their policy in the GLUP, but it was an expectation. And so it wasn't construed as voluntary by the development community because it was a very clearly stated expectation that you will give us 10% of the gross floor area. And so this is an important thing that the board and really doesn't have the ability to influence which method of compliance a developer chooses on the base. Talk about bonus next month. But on-site units, it's 5% of the gross floor area. You noticed before we were talking about 10%, and now we're knocked down to 5% of the gross floor area. And that's only 5% above the first FAR. So it's even less when you talk about total FAR for the building, or total GFA. Or the developer can provide units offsite nearby at kind of 1.5 times that, 7.5%, or offsite anywhere else in the county at 10% GFA. And you just recently had a project, the Haven, which the Macy's project, which is the first ever that actually did this in the 17 years that we've had the ordinance. So you can debate the merits of that. And the last option is the cash contribution. So the cash contribution, next slide, it's based on the amount of the building area up to the maximum FAR corresponding to the zoning district. And there may be additional FAR beyond that. And that's bonus. We're going to set that aside and talk about that next time. But the applicable rates are adjusted annually. They're indexed to the consumer price index for housing for our region. At the bottom, there's the 2023 rates. And the contribution rate is established at the date that the site plan application is accepted. So you may review it, and there may be a disphase in the year that it was accepted, in the year that it's approved, but the acceptance date is the date when the rates apply. And it's paid to the county when the certificate of occupancy is issued. So there could be a lag of years between the time a site plan is approved and when it actually delivers. And the longer that is, the real value of that's eroded a little bit by inflation.
So Russell, the base contribution, very predictable.
It's very predictable.
To the developer.
And this was a really important thing for developers to have something that was predictable that they could know, and for landowners too. So this cost is pretty much baked into land values in Arlington, and so upsetting it is it's upsetting kind of the land economics of the way things work here.
Upsetting, you mean if the ordinance were to be reopened?
Yes.
It would, yeah, sure.
Yes, it would create, that unpredictability. And so if it were to happen, it would need to happen in a friendlier environment and in short order. So a hypothetical example, and I'll try and be quick, not much more. But if you had a project with a site area of 50,000 square feet, so that would be your one FAR is 50,000 square feet, and say the project was 162,000 square feet, gives you a total floor area of 3.24. Most of the GLUP districts go up to. And the zoning district allows for a site plan to go up to 3.24. So your project comes in, funny enough, at precisely 3.24 of the FAR. The first FAR, the first 50,000 square feet are exempt. So we just take that and say, no, not getting anything off of that. The rest of the square footage, the 1,112, would be multiplied by that 5% of the floor area to get the number of units. And we're not getting a number of units, we're getting a gross floor area. So in this case, it'd be 5,600 square feet. And every project's going to be different as far as the average size of units, but for the sake of this example, 700 square foot would yield us about 8 units on that base. So that's our unit yield from the base. But next slide, the developer likes this method much better, which is the cash contribution. And so this there's the different tiers. It's a low tier, the $2.26 for the first FAR, $6 for the from 1 to 3 FAR, in this case 100,000 square feet, and then the really high $12 per square foot for anything above 3. And so the total for cash contribution would be, in this case, 863,000. It's an exercise in math. It's very.
And Russell, for this, the cost of a CAF unit, isn't it like 600K or something? Essentially.
Well, the cost of a CAF unit, when we provide, there's two ways to think about cost. When the county provides AHIF funding to a developer, it's usually $100,000 or less, between 85 and 100. So in this case, if you take the 8 units that you were going to get on the other one, you're getting a little bit more than 100,000 per unit. And so we're actually can stretch that a tiny bit farther. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide. Right. So this summarizes, in this scenario, the developer has a choice: doing on-site units where they give us 8 units on-site, 12 units off-site nearby, 16 units somewhere else in the county, or a cash contribution. And again, it's entirely up to the developer which one they choose. Next slide. So that's what it is. The results to date, from 2016, when that should say 2006, not 2016. From 2006 to 2022, we've received $63 million in developer contributions to AHIF. 15 million of that or almost 16 from commercial development, 47 from residential development. And we have on the books in approved projects an additional 43, almost $44 million that will eventually be coming to the AHIF once those projects come to completion. We've only received 30 on-site units in 17 years. This puts aside the affordable housing developments that come through site plan, which obviously have to comply with the ordinance, but because they're mission-based and that's another story. So only 30 units and 4 site plans. One was Founders Square, and developer was trying to very favor project approved. Sedona Slate had other conditions. It was a special affordable housing protection district. It was Roslyn Commons down Wilson that way, Clarendon. And so they had a replacement of units that they had to complete. So that this, by abiding by the ordinance, it also helped them. It's kind of a double dipping situation, if you will. In order to comply with the special affordable housing protection district, units were provided. And then 2 projects that only had 1 unit each, 2020 in Pershing and 20 and Verde Point. Both of those also had other affordable units through bonus density. And because the way the formula is that for the cash contribution, that's calculated on that first FAR, and the unit contribution isn't taking that first FAR, it created a situation where actually the cost per unit, the comparison favored them giving us the unit actually. It's a very unique situation and will happen when there's like maybe 1 unit. When we did the affordable housing master plan, we looked at what's the benefit to the county. So we get cash, and we have no means to say whether we get cash or units. But when we do get cash, what do we do with that? We're able to get a little bit more units. And actually, the site plan units, they're only affordable for 30 years. We know that when we provide AHIF to affordable housing developers, that those units are going to be affordable for 60 years at a minimum, and we're saying 75 and 99. So there's a multiplier. And yes, we don't see a number of units, but the utility of those units, it's affordable for much longer. And I think that's something that it's of benefit to the county. So we did conduct a financial analysis of the ordinance and trying to figure out how does the cash contribution compare to the cost of providing that unit on site. So basically, there's a difference between the rent that they're going to get if it's a market rate unit and the affordable rent. And multiply that by a cap rate or divide it by a cap rate. And come up with an amount. And the amount is actually about, depending on the location, anywhere from a third of the value of that unit to 1/2 of the value. Which would suggest that our dollar cash contribution rate is low. At this point, given the legislative climate in Richmond, staff isn't proposing to seek an amendment to the Code of Virginia. We'll continue to work with our legislative liaison to identify a time when that might bear fruit for us, but at present, it's not a path that we're ready to embark on. And then next month, Melissa Danowski will be here to talk about bonus density and other provisions that go beyond the base.
So Russell, thank you for the presentation. It was super helpful. 2 questions. The first, in the draft regional fair housing plan, it does say as one of the goals to review the affordable housing ordinance, which surprised me to see that in there. And I was curious, what is the county planning with that review?
Yeah, and that was in our in the implementation framework that the manager put forward last year, and that involved really looking at, again, looking at the question of what is the cash contribution compared to the value. Are these options are supposed to be equal? A should equal B. There's no question about that. A doesn't equal B. But in the current environment, our chances are, they just don't exist right now to change that. So that's really what the review of the ordinance was meant to do. The Community Foundation, a couple years ago, undertook another analysis, and they did a series of stakeholder interviews with developers and so forth as well, to try to see, is there room to get that 5% up to 7.5%? And their results were not very positive as well. They came back with a report that indicated that there wasn't additional value to be captured. You know, we're not in a good place to change the ordinance right now.
I think it would still be helpful to share with the public and advocacy groups what it should be when the environment does shift. And so basically people have an opportunity to prepare the advocacy for, you know, when it's a good time, what should we be pushing for? I feel like now there's just a lot of uncertainty. Like, I don't know what it should be. We know it's probably not great what it is today. But if staff is at least able to provide that, you know, this would be parity, I think that would be.
Right. We're working with the board and the attorney's office to release a document. So that should be forthcoming.
I had one other question, and then Eric, can you explain the difference between the use permit process and the site plan process?
They both involve SPRC. They both involve planning commission approval, county board approval. use permit, usually the fees are much lower. There's usually a lot less density involved. There's certain conditions. There's some very, very special, unique things in the zoning ordinance for affordable housing, the voluntary.
Oxmite Village was a use permit project.
Okay.
So that's an example.
Yeah,
It's not
voluntary
required.
housing,
But it's-
preservation and.
Yeah, but there was like a bunch of conditions and they actually had to provide. I had very conversations with staff pushing, because there were some issues with how they actually delivered the unit, but there were, I think, 2 units for home ownership.
Yeah.
There were four units.
Or
Right,
2-bedroom units.
right. And,
Two are still
but
for
that was a
sale.
special situation, but that was definitely use permit,
Yeah.
not site plan.
You
It's
can-
not a huge project.
Right.
Sorry.
Buchanan Gardens is another one, but they did bump outs on the units. And I think in order to do that, they had to seek relief on some of the zoning, and the means for doing that was through a use permit process. So it's like site plan light. So there aren't, site plan, there's administrative regulation 4.1 that's like a book, that's like 61, standard conditions. Use permits have much less.
Yeah, I mean, so a couple questions and a comment. I mean, I think, so this was, I really appreciate this, and everybody who joins the Housing Commission in the future should just watch this.
Yeah.
Really, it's really great. But the bigger topic, which you didn't cover because it's a whole big topic, is really inclusionary zoning. It's really this idea, like we're playing with the market a little bit here. We're capturing value, but it does have these other impacts, right? I was curious because obviously it does. You're saying it's baked into the contribution is baked into the land price. Well, that has a market impact, doesn't it, on the other housing that developer is also bringing to market? I'm not saying I oppose this program. I strongly support it, but it does depend upon the rest of the revenue generated from that development to support the contribution, right? Has staff ever done like an analysis, and maybe it was part of the other analysis you've done, like the impact of these contributions on the rest of the housing, basically, like, because we're providing housing at this level, it's putting a bit pressure up here, the market rate units.
Yeah, the contribution accounts for about 1% of total costs.
Okay. So it's a negligible, you think it's a negligible impact?
Yeah, 1 to 1.5% at most.
Okay, okay. My other question, you're probably never going to speak to me again before, but I have to ask it. What is the applicability of the ordinance in a specific set of residential zoning districts that are currently under debate? The EHO districts.
There's absolutely no, well, first of all, the EHO wouldn't be a site plan. But let's put that aside and say if it were a site plan, the FAR would not exceed 1.0 really in any case. I mean, a 6,000 square foot house on a 6,000 square foot lot is
right.
It's pretty hard to meet the other dimensional standards. I don't think you could do that.
So I'm not asking you to play county attorney, but I've heard folks, as part of that conversation, it's like, can we require, affordable housing? And I'm like, well, if we can require it, it needs to be required because we can require it as part of the ordinance. Right. We need some authority. And if you're saying basically it's very unlikely that it would fit that criteria, then it seems to me that we don't necessarily have a vehicle to do that at this point, if that were a policy objective.
Now, we don't, and I think further to that point, that an affordable requirement would pretty much tip the balance in favor of the other development option that.
I mean, that would be my other concern, because there's no scale in that building. But I've heard so many people say it, like, conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that? No, go.
Okay. Is affordable 80% for this?
No, affordable is 60% of AMI for.
Okay. So
For the base ordinance.
Are there starting to be conversations about what happens at year 30? I mean, I guess there's not that many. It's really those two that have like any meaningful like number. Yeah.
That's, well,
I don't need to get into
there's
details about this.
older ones, so in the last decade, we've seen maybe 60 units kind of fall out of the CAF portfolio, and those were all site plan units that kind of pre-ordinance site plan units. And they, because they're market-driven developers, there's no interest in continuing to provide those. Yeah.
How does this interplay with, like, the Columbia Pike Form-Based Code has other affordability? And that's a plan, so can you hold people to that? How does that work with this? Because there are much higher, like, affordability numbers.
Yeah, they work separately. It's a different regime. So that might be another, thing to come back and talk about, because it's a big thing.
It is also late, so.
In and of itself.
Yeah, but it's not site plan, that's form.
It's not site plan. There's
But they
its
often go
own.
through a lot of the same, like, process at the end of the day, because they're asking for.
Yes, unfortunately, that wasn't the way it was envisioned, but that's the way it's worked out, yeah.
They don't have to go to SPRC.
Just a couple quick questions. So the 30 on-site units, that's on-site, not, so do we have any off-site units?
Well, the Haven, as part of the Macy's development, that is the only one that is an off-site.
Oh, okay.
That's the first one in 17 years, and we were kind of scratching our heads thinking, well, do we even need to have that option on the books anymore?
Okay.
But it's interesting that happened. It's unusual.
So it's not that that's a data point that was omitted. It's just that there isn't an existing data point yet.
Yeah.
Because there are 2B.
Well, yeah. If you, in most cases, it probably is more beneficial for a developer, or cheaper, more economical for them to provide the cash contribution than the offsite units, because as we know, even when we do preservation, it's about $100,000 a unit. Certainly Barcroft was. And so if you're going to provide twice as many units offsite array, that's
No, because I liked the opposite. From our perspective, that's our best number. From the developer's perspective, the cash is the best number.
Yeah, and it's a trade-off, because I think the county really has an interest in seeing affordable units integrated into the urban, the new. But we've seen developments in recent years, Terwilliger Place, Queens Court, Union on Queen, in the RB corridor that are very adjacent to Metro, and that's important.
So my last question was that not to speak more positively of Alexandria, but Alexandria had this prior to Arlington. And so are some of our other, and I can't speak to Fairfax or other, but are some of our other adjacent communities part of the conversation that may potentially be approaching date?
No. And I'll tell you why. What I failed to mention. So the ordinance that Arlington came up with and was codified at the state applies exclusively to Arlington County, because and it's actually not in the Code of Virginia in the section where it talks about inclusionary zoning. It's under the county manager form of government. So, which is kind of bizarre. And we're the only jurisdiction in.
Right.
So the ordinance is written and structured such that it only applies to Arlington. And so Fairfax does have an inclusionary policy, but it's important to, and I think when we were doing the Affordable Housing Master Plan, some people tried, took us to task on this, that we don't have inclusionary. Well, the ordinance is a type of inclusionary zoning. In Fairfax, it only applies to basically stick-built buildings. So it's like, well, all the buildings that, if we had that same ordinance here, it would be kind of meaningless, because most of the new development is concrete and steel. So it's a different class of development that those ordinances apply to.
I think last question.
Distinctions that are lost sometimes. when
Yeah,
comparing
and
those
truthfully, I don't
policies.
know, in Alexandria, I don't know whether ours was the Housing Trust Fund and it was attached to new development. I don't know what its legal basis was beneath that.
And Alexandria also has a contribution on commercial development.
Oh,
but-
yes.
But our ordinance is actually.
Okay, I have a question related to the ordinance, but I just wanted to clarify what I heard. You're using what they call a proffer system.
I'm not talking about the proffer system per se, but they do have an inclusionary, and it's really for a greenfield kind of development that's similar, and we can go farther afield. Montgomery County provides us with a moderately priced dwelling than PDU program, and that's kind of greenfield new development usually, although it does apply to other things as well.
Yeah, I was just curious about that, but to hear, because I wasn't sure I heard it. But what I wanted to ask about Arlington's ordinance is, you said that the ordinance applies to both commercial and residential site plans, correct?
That's correct.
And so that does the base ordinance apply to the commercial?
That's
Or
correct.
only the density of the?
No, the base ordinance, so up to what the zoning allows.
Okay.
We
But just to clarify that right now, the ordinance, the site plan ordinance, only applies to multifamily residential and not single family, or am I incorrect?
Yes, it doesn't apply to single family. Single family would never exceed the FAR, and single family isn't.
Not even if
it's not subject to
townhouses?
site plan review. What's that?
Not even if it's townhouse.
Not.
All right, that explains.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. Looking forward to the second half next month. But I appreciate learning all about that.
Yeah, very helpful.
Thanks for staying late with us.
Yes, yes.
Alexander will get it.
So we have one final item, well, technically more, but one action, the budget. Hopefully we can get through this quickly. I think we have a quick presentation. Hopefully everyone was able to look over the analysis that I sent out earlier this week to at least give people a sense of what's in it and some of the recommendations that I'm proposing.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right, I can start. And Nicole Dula from DHS will be joining in a couple slides, and we've already messaged on the side, and we're going to try to make this as quick as possible for you all. My name is Marie Randall. I'm the finance supervisor with the housing division. And probably just to start off this, the work session for housing and DHS was earlier today. It was at 3 o'clock, and so it's recorded. And I think it's a great way to see this presentation, hear the questions, hear all the comments from folks like Kellen, providing, information to the board. So I would highly recommend looking at that. All right, so here we go, and I'm gonna go through relatively quickly because there is that other information, but feel free to stop or ask questions. So this just shows the monies going into housing this year, and the one that I'm going to talk about, the one bullet, is the Columbia Pike TIF, which is right here, and Nicole will touch on all of the other ones. Oops, sorry. Okay, so housing, we look at it, and why we do a combined budget with DHS is we look at it as there are the CAFs that housing helps to produce with our AHIF financing and everything you just saw Russell present. And then DHS comes in with support services for some of their clients, as well as grant subsidies such as the Housing Choice Voucher Program and housing grants. So you've seen this slide probably before. Arlington County is a mission-driven lender, and our goal is to create and preserve committed affordable units. AHIF is used as residual receipt or cash flow loans, so we get repaid when there is cash flow in the project. The county board at this point has approved over 120 loans with about $450 million allocated through those loans. There have been approximately 150 million in loan repayments received, which is about 40, which also signifies that about 43% of the loans that we have put out there have been paid in full. And the FY24 recommendation is for 9.7 million for AHIF and ongoing funds. Okay, so as you all know, the county's CAF portfolio grew, pretty substantially between FY 2020 and FY 22. There's some big projects in there. So we've gone from 8,600 or 8,650 CAFs to over 11,000, which is a 28% increase, as well as the number of CAFs that are less than 30% AMI nearly doubled, although not close to 11,000. And again, Ann touched on this with her comments before, is that we've increased our CAF inspections from about 5% of the portfolio to over 20% of the portfolio between FY21 and FY23, and those inspections are underway. With regards to the Barcroft Apartments, as you all know, in FY22, $150 million county line of credit was used to support the purchase of that property, which includes over 1,300 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The county is working with Gyre Lynch on a master finance and development plan for the property, and more information about that is hoping to come to the board as well as all of you all within the next several months. And so what that means, though, is the debt service on a $150 million line of credit is projected, because interest rates have risen since first modeling had happened. So it's projected to be $7.8 million in FY24. As you may remember, that Gyre Lynch pays the county $1.5 million, or about 1% of the interest on the loan annually. So if you take that into account, the net expense would be about $6.3 million to pay that debt service. And debt service is expected to increase in the out years for this loan. So the Columbia Pike TIF as a source for this project, or 4 projects. So you may know or remember that the TIF was established in 2013 to help finance affordable housing initiatives in support of the Columbia Pike Neighborhoods Area Plan. At this point, it has generated about $4.1 million in revenue and has assisted 3 housing projects to date. And those are Gilliam Place, Arlington View Terrace East, and a small portion to Arlington Mill. In FY24, the county manager recommends, or for FY24, the county manager recommends that the current TIF fund balance plus revenue collected in FY24 are used to support Barcroft debt. So it's projected that the balance for FY24 will be about $3.8 million. There'll be additional revenue of about $1.4 million, and that 5.3 would be helping to pay for Barcroft debt. So this slide basically puts it all together. So basically, if you have the 9.7 in AHIF ongoing funds, plus the Columbia Pike TIF balance and revenue, the loan repayments and payoffs that are projected, and also the developer contributions that are projected, and plus our federal CDBG entitlement, we get projected sources of about $22.3 million. And then you see what the Barcroft debt service and the Buckingham Villages 3 debt service is about 9.8 million. So we'd have about 12.5 million for other projects. And then just one thing to highlight that we've talked a lot about, specifically with the Serrano, is that we are continuing our inspections and property support. So this year we have about 200 in FY23. We have about $200,000 in general and ARPA fund that those inspections are pretty much underway. And we provided a third-party firm to do that, hoping to get approximately 2,000 additional units this year or this fiscal year. And then in FY24, housing will continue to work with the county manager for support for this work and for funds for this work. And that, I will turn it over to Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you, Marie. As Marie announced, my name is Nicole Dula. I am on the housing side at the Department of Human Services. So I'm going to present the proposed FY24 budget for housing programs and services. Starting with eviction prevention, within the Department of Human Services, we have a Community Assistance Bureau that has been on the forefront in the community throughout the pandemic, assisting residents with critical, targeted prevention tools of assistance, particularly those in crisis, those needing facing housing emergencies. So as one of the FY24 priorities, the county manager's proposed budget is focused on an emphasis on stabilizing households in Arlington and improving housing conditions. During COVID, while we were fortunate to relieve some relief from the statewide rent relief portal from December of 2020 through June of 2022, we have been able to assist Arlingtonians through that statewide portal through eviction prevention efforts to the tune of $35 million. And a lot of that fund, again, was birthed through ARPA, CARES funding that was released to combat the pandemic crisis. So now that we are here, we're approaching what in the industry we're now calling the COVID cliff, where these funds are drying up and coming to an end. We are still seeing the lingering effects of how the pandemic has still affected some households within the community. So with that said, in our FY24 budget, we are requesting $3 million in one-time funds and $600,000 in ongoing for eviction prevention focus. In FY23 to date, right now, we've already spent $5.4 million that has been dispersed. Thus far, that's equated to over 1,025 unduplicated households that we've served, an average of 2.1 times, to the tune of the amount of $2,246,000. Because the demand and the recurring needs for assistance have outpaced our pre-COVID budget, with the need to, we've been going back and forth to the county requesting reallocations from our initial FY23 budgets, which has increased to the 5.4 that I've articulated. But we've also had to reinstate some of our eligibility criteria that were in effect pre-COVID that we did lax during the COVID pandemic. I'm not going to go on through all of these, but the newer ones that were implemented as of January of 2023, there is now a $7,000 cap, annual assistance cap on households requesting assistance. We've had to remove the eligibility criteria from 80% of AMI of households that are seeking assistance down to 50% of area median income. And we are now looking at the rent amounts for those requesting assistance and setting the eligibility standards at equal to or less than 150% of the fair market rents in Arlington. The rest of these components are eligibility criteria we've had prior to COVID. Next slide. All right, continuing with the FY24 priorities, there is an ongoing commitment to support the county's housing grant program.
FY24 proposed budget, we've included 2.4 million in one-time funds for a total program budget of 14.4 million. 90% of our existing current participating housing grant clients are in committed affordable units. Approximately 89% of our participants have household incomes that are less than 30% AMI. And I think this is continuing to be indicative that the housing grant program is serving those that are most vulnerable. We do project with our budget ask for FY24 that the average monthly grant will increase to $775 with a projected overall participation increase, because we're still an open program. Receiving applications daily will increase by 4.9% over the FY23 levels. You can, through the work session, Anita talked about the dip in 2023 regarding the lax COVID criteria that we had for households. So that there's a bit more on that recording to address that. Next slide. Okay. This is our maximum allowable rents, of course, with housing grant program. Since FY 2020, we've received commitment from the county manager to continue to move the index for the maximum allowable rents for the program each year with each budget cycle. So we're fortunate to continue to move that index to point to 60% of the area median income. This allows for the grants to be competitive, it's late, competitive in the community, as well as, you know, expand the rental subsidy amount for our participants who are in the program, so that the grant can keep pace with the rising rents. Next slide. All right, so my last visit to this commission, I spoke about the county board's amended guidance for a stakeholder review of the housing grant program. We did give an update today of where we are. Specifically, DHS was charged to study the current purpose and the configuration of the housing grants program, and provide any subsequent recommendations to the county board on potential changes and the budget implications related to those proposed changes. Some of the prominent themes of why we're focusing on this study was either, do we need to go deeper in terms of the benefits that we provide? Should the eligibility population beyond seniors, those with disabilities, and working families be amended? So essentially, DHS began the study in the summer of 2022. We were able to consult with a firm to conduct participant and former participant and current participant focus groups. We've done 9 of them, including in-person as well as telephone surveys. We've then progressed to many stakeholders at commissions, advocacy group partners, and had focus groups with them, as well as internally among the county. So we've had about 8 interviews with DHS representatives, as well as our sibling department at CPHD. In the spring, essentially, what our plan is to come back to the community and provide a status update, as well as go back to those stakeholder groups and present some of the draft recommendations as a result of all the information we collected. We're hoping with not only the recommendations, but the budgetary impacts. We'll come back to the county manager and the board in the summer with a final report. And there will be some decisions on what will be baked into the FY25 budget process for any amendments. Next slide. Normally, the housing choice voucher, which is 100% federally funded program, is not really highlighted during our budget work sessions. But as the director of our housing assistance programs, I'm happy for the first time that this program was highlighted. I have a great team that works very hard on this program and all the HUD regulations that they have to follow. But the housing choice voucher does add to the residents in the community and beyond Arlington who we support with